The granite headstone stood silent against the Virginia morning, carved with a name that meant everything and nothing all at once. Staff Sergeant Katherine Hayes knelt in the damp grass of Arlington National Cemetery, her dress blues precise and sharp against the soft earth. 15 years, 15 springs without her father's voice, 15 winters without his steady hand on her shoulder. She placed a single rifle cartridge at the base of the stone, a tradition among snipers, and traced the letters with her fingertips. Gunnery Sergeant Robert Hayes, Medal of Honor, Fallujah, Iraq, 2009. Her throat tightened. The polished surface reflected her face back at her, a woman now where a girl once stood. But the eyes were the same. His eyes, steel gray and unwavering. Katie whispered into the stillness, "I'm trying, Dad, but they won't let me fight." The words hung there unanswered, swallowed by the rows of white markers stretching to the horizon. Around her, families gathered at other graves, some crying, some standing in military silence. She envied them their tears. Hers had dried years ago, replaced by something harder. Determination, or maybe just stubbornness. Her father would have called it both. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear as broken glass. She was 14, standing in the Montana snow outside their ranch house. Her father crouched beside her, his breath misting in the cold, his hands guiding hers on the old hunting rifle. His voice was low and certain. "A true warrior doesn't seek glory, Katie girl. They seek to protect those who can't protect themselves. Remember that when I'm gone." She had laughed then, thinking him invincible. "Dad, you're not going anywhere." But 6 months later, he was kneeling in a Fallujah street, bleeding out from shrapnel, holding the hand of a young Marine while insurgent rounds cracked overhead. He saved 40 men that day. The medal came posthumously. Katie got a folded flag and a hole in her chest that never quite closed. Among those 40 was Sergeant Major James Cooper, a man Katie had never met, but whose name appeared in her father's letters home. "Your dad pulled me out when I had nothing left," Cooper had written to Katie's mother years later. "Told me I had grandkids to meet someday. Made me promise to keep fighting." That promise had kept Cooper alive through 2 more deployments and 15 years of peacetime. Katie wondered sometimes if he still remembered the man who had saved him. She stood now, brushing grass from her knees, and walked the long path back to her rental car. The drive to Camp Pendleton would take 3 hours. Enough time to bury the past again, to lock the grief away where it belonged. Tomorrow, the battalion deployed for Operation Sierra Guardian, a rescue mission at the Arizona border. Tomorrow, she would watch from the sidelines while others did the fighting. Because that was her place. That was what they had decided. The sun climbed higher as Katie drove south through California, past vineyards and strip malls and billboards promising redemption or insurance or both. Her phone sat silent in the cup holder. Her mother was gone too, cancer 3 years back, leaving Katie alone with a legacy she could not escape and a uniform she was not allowed to fill. She turned up the radio to drown the thoughts, but the music felt hollow. Everything did lately. Camp Pendleton sprawled across the coastal hills like a small city, all concrete and purpose. Katie showed her ID at the gate and wound through the familiar roads to the armory. The building smelled of gun oil and metal, a scent that steadied her more than any meditation ever could. She found her corner in the back, away from the others, and spread her gear on the bench. The M40A6 sniper rifle lay before her like a prayer. She began the ritual. Strip, inspect, clean, reassemble. Her hands moved with the precision her father had taught her, the same motions he had practiced 1,000 times before her. She kept a small green notebook beside the rifle, filled with her handwriting, ballistic tables, wind calculations, range notes, every detail logged like scripture, because her father had done the same. She had his old notebook at home, the one from Iraq, the pages yellowed and stained with desert dust. She studied it like other people studied family photo albums. The armory door banged open. Voices tumbled in, loud and careless. Katie did not look up. She knew the sound of men who felt invincible. She had grown up around them. Well, if it isn't the metal baby. Corporal Luis Garcia stood in the doorway with 3 others, his grin wide and mean. He was young, maybe 23, with the kind of swagger that came from never having lost anything that mattered. Katie kept cleaning her rifle. She had learned long ago that silence was armor. Garcia stepped closer. "Yo, Hayes, you planning to actually shoot that thing? or just polish it till you can see your daddy's ghost in the barrel. The others laughed. Katie tightened the bolt into place and made a note in her book. Elevation adjustment plus 2 clicks. The laughter grated, but she let it slide off. Words were just noise. Noise could not hurt you unless you let it in. Garcia leaned against her bench. Seriously though, you ever wonder if they only gave you that sniper slot because of the last name? I mean, your old man was a hero and all, but that doesn't mean you can shoot for shit. Katie closed her notebook and met his eyes. The silence stretched. Garcia's grin faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. She spoke quietly, each word deliberate. You finished, Corporal? Garcia pushed off the bench. Yeah, I'm done. Just making conversation. He turned to leave, then glanced back. Hey, don't worry. We'll keep you safe on logistics duty. Wouldn't want anything to happen to the precious cargo. The door slammed. Katie returned to her rifle. Her hands did not shake. They never did. She had learned that too from her father, and from the years of enduring men like Garcia who thought a name was the only thing she carried. Let them think what they wanted. She knew the truth. She had earned her place through blood and sweat at Scout Sniper School, through nights on the range when her fingers bled and her eyes burned. She was not her father's charity case. She was his daughter, and daughters could be warriors too. The mess hall that evening was a blur of noise and bodies. Katie carried her tray to the far corner and sat alone. She ate methodically, tasting nothing, her mind already on tomorrow's briefing. Around her, Marines joked and argued and told stories that grew bigger with each retelling. She was invisible among them, a ghost at the feast. Across the hall, Master Sergeant Jake Coleman watched her. He was older than most, maybe 52, with gray threading his dark hair and a face carved by too many deployments. He sat with a group of senior NCOs, but his attention kept drifting to the girl in the corner. Katie Hayes, Robert's daughter. The weight of that knowledge sat heavy on his shoulders. Jake had been there in Fallujah. He had seen Robert Hayes charge into fire to drag 3 wounded Marines to safety, had watched him take shrapnel meant for someone else, had held his hand while the medics worked, and the life drained from his eyes. Robert's last words haunted Jake still. Tell Katie she's stronger than she knows. Don't let anyone stop her from flying. Jake had promised. But in the 15 years since, he had broken that promise every day. He could not look at Katie without seeing Robert bleeding in the dirt, could not watch her prepare for combat without imagining her in a flag-draped coffin. So he had stayed silent, stayed away. Let others decide she was not ready, not right, not enough. Coward, he thought. You're a coward, Coleman. One of the NCOs elbowed him. You gonna eat that or just stare at it? Jake blinked and looked down at his untouched food. Not hungry. He stood and dumped his tray, then walked out into the cool evening. The sky was bleeding orange and purple, the kind of sunset Robert used to love. Jake lit a cigarette and let the smoke fill his lungs. Somewhere behind him, Katie Hayes cleaned her rifle and prepared for a war she would not be allowed to fight. He wondered if she hated him for it. He wondered if she should. The briefing room the next morning was packed with bodies and heat. Katie sat in the back, her small green notebook balanced on her knee, a pen tucked behind her ear. Colonel Marcus Stone stood at the front, tall and square-jawed, his uniform crisp and his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from 30 years of service. Beside him, a map glowed on the projection screen. Arizona, Mexico border, a compound marked in red. Stone clicked through the slides. Operation Sierra Guardian. Mission, rescue 120 American hostages from a cartel compound. Intel indicates light resistance. 80 to 100 cartel fighters, small arms only. Our force, 480 Marines plus Special Forces support. This is a quick in and out. Secure the compound, extract the hostages, return home. Questions? Katie raised her hand. Stone's eyes flicked to her, then away. Sergeant Hayes. Sir, the terrain around that compound. She stood, moved to the map, pointed at the contour lines. This valley creates a natural choke point. Elevated positions on 3 sides. If they know we're coming, it's a perfect kill zone. Stone's jaw tightened. Sergeant, your assignment is logistics and supply, not tactical planning. Sir, I'm just pointing out. Your input is noted. Stone cut her off, his tone flat. Return to your seat. The room was silent. Katie felt the eyes on her, some pitying, some annoyed, most indifferent. She sat down slowly, her face burning. Beside her, a young private smirked and whispered to his neighbor. Metal baby thinks she's a colonel. Katie opened her notebook and began writing. She sketched the compound from memory, marked sight lines and firing positions, calculated distances and elevations. Her hand moved fast and sure. Let them dismiss her. She would be ready anyway. The briefing continued. Stone outlined the assault plan with the confidence of a man who had never been wrong. Air support on standby, armor in reserve, clean and simple. Katie listened and saw only disaster. The compound was too fortified, the approaches too narrow, the intel too clean. Something was wrong. She could feel it the way her father used to feel storms coming before the sky turned dark. After the briefing, Captain David Martinez approached her. He was 35, lean and sharp-eyed, with the kind of quiet intensity that came from caring too much. He had been one of the few who supported Katie from the start, who saw past the name to the skill beneath. Hayes, you were right in there. Katie shrugged. Doesn't matter. I'm not on the assault team. Martinez glanced around, then lowered his voice. Between you and me, this whole op feels rushed. Intel is too perfect, but Stone won't hear dissent. He's trying to make general before he retires. Katie nodded. What about Overwatch? We need snipers on the high ground before the assault. Already assigned. 3 teams from 2nd Battalion. You're on supply coordination. Of course. Katie's voice was flat. Wouldn't want the metal baby getting her hands dirty. Martinez frowned. That's not why, and you know it. Stone made a promise to someone. He's keeping you safe whether you like it or not. Katie looked at him sharply. Promise to who? Martinez hesitated, then shook his head. Not my story to tell. Just watch yourself, Hayes. And if things go sideways out there, you do what you need to do. Orders be damned. He walked away. Katie stood alone in the emptying briefing room, staring at the map still glowing on the screen. She thought about her father's words. Protect those who can't protect themselves. She thought about 480 Marines walking into a valley that smelled like a trap. She thought about promises and safety and the weight of a name she had not chosen but could not escape. That night, Katie could not sleep. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, while around her the barracks settled into the sounds of rest, snoring, shifting, the occasional cough. She rose quietly and dressed in civilian clothes, then slipped out into the night. The base was never truly dark, just dimmer, lit by street lamps and the glow of distant buildings. She walked to the admin building and used her access card to enter. The halls were empty. She made her way to the intel section and logged into the database using her credentials. It took her 20 minutes of searching before she found what she needed. Compound Sierra Ghost, declassified CIA black site, active 1998 to 2003. Katie's heart hammered as she read. The compound had been used for training Allied forces, specifically Afghan and Kurdish fighters, in counterinsurgency tactics. The instructors had been hand-picked Marines and Special Forces operators. She scrolled through the personnel list and stopped. Gunnery Sergeant Robert Hayes, sniper instructor, 2001 to 2002. Her father had been there. 23 years ago, he had trained fighters in that exact compound, had walked those ridges, had mapped those firing positions. Katie's hands trembled as she downloaded the files to a thumb drive. She pulled up satellite imagery and compared it to the old training maps. The compound had been expanded, reinforced, but the bones were the same. And there on the north ridge overlooking the valley was a position marked in her father's handwriting. Best Overwatch, 1,200 meters, wind west at dawn. Katie kept reading. Another name caught her eye in the personnel files. Colonel Marcus Wade, training officer, 2001 to 2003. Status, discharged for cause, 2008. Current whereabouts unknown. She had heard that name before. Wade had been her father's mentor in the early years, had visited their Montana ranch when Katie was 10, bringing gifts and stories. Then he had vanished from their lives. Her mother had mentioned once that Wade had been dishonorably discharged for corruption, but never spoke of it again. Katie had assumed he was dead or in prison. Now she stared at his name next to her father's and felt ice in her veins. Wade knew this compound, knew the terrain. And if he was working with the cartel, if he was the one training those fighters, then the intel was not just wrong. It was a trap designed by someone who knew exactly how Marines would think. Katie logged out and erased her tracks, then returned to the barracks. In her footlocker, beneath folded clothes, she found her father's old journal. Her mother had given it to her before the cancer took her, wrapped in plastic to preserve the desert-worn pages. Katie opened it carefully and flipped through entries from Iraq, from training missions, from the quiet moments between combat. Then she found an entry from 2001. Sierra Ghost Compound. Trained 12 Afghans on long-range shooting today. The North Ridge is perfect. Clear sight lines, natural cover, wind predictable. If I ever had to defend this place, that's where I'd be. Told the men the same. A good sniper owns the high ground before the fight starts. Below it, written in different ink, dated months later, Wade is pushing tactics I don't agree with. Too aggressive. Collateral damage doesn't bother him like it should. I worry what he'll become if this war doesn't end soon. Some men need war too much. Katie closed the journal and pressed it to her chest. Her father had known, had seen something dark in Wade even then. And now Wade was out there waiting, and 480 Marines were about to walk into his perfect kill zone. She made her decision then, alone in the dark, with only her father's words for company. If the mission went wrong, she would not wait for permission. She would not follow orders that left men to die. She would take her rifle and her father's knowledge, and she would do what he had taught her to do. She would protect those who could not protect themselves. Morning came too fast. The base erupted into organized chaos as 480 Marines prepared to deploy. Trucks lined up in long convoys. Gear was checked and rechecked. Officers barked orders, and NCOs herded their squads with practiced efficiency. Katie moved through it all like a ghost, loading supply trucks and coordinating logistics with the mechanical precision of someone whose mind was elsewhere. Garcia and his friends passed her, laughing about something. One of them called out, "Hey, Hayes, don't worry. We'll bring you back a souvenir. Maybe a cartel t-shirt or something." Katie ignored them. She was busy calculating. The North Ridge was 7 kilometers from the staging area. Rough terrain, steep climb. She would need 2 hours minimum to get into position. That meant leaving before dawn, before the assault began. It meant disobeying direct orders. It meant risking court-martial. It meant honoring her father's legacy the only way that mattered. She finished loading the last truck and stepped back. Around her, Marines climbed into vehicles, checked weapons, adjusted helmets. The energy was high, confident. They believed the intel. They believed in the plan. Katie envied them that certainty. Master Sergeant Coleman appeared beside her, silent as smoke. He watched the preparations with unreadable eyes, then glanced at Katie. "You good, Sergeant?" Katie met his gaze. Coleman had always been distant with her, polite but cold, as if proximity might burn him. She wondered why. "Fine, Master Sergeant, just doing my job." Coleman nodded slowly. "Your father used to say that, just doing my job, right before he did something crazy brave." Katie's breath caught. "You knew him." It was not a question. Coleman's face twisted with something that might have been pain or regret or both. "Yeah, I knew him. Fallujah, he saved my life. And I've been a coward ever since." The words hung between them. Around them, engines roared to life. Coleman reached into his pocket and pulled out a small radio earpiece. He held it out to Katie. "Channel 7, emergency frequency, not monitored by command." Katie took it carefully. "Why are you giving me this?" Coleman looked away toward the horizon where the sun was climbing. "Because Robert Hayes died asking me to tell you something. And I never did. He said you're stronger than you know. He said not to let anyone stop you from flying." He looked back at her, his eyes wet. "I've been stopping you, Katie, trying to keep you safe because I couldn't keep him safe. But that's not what he wanted. That's just me being scared." Katie's throat closed. She could not speak. "Coleman Strayoend, if things go bad out there, you do what you need to do. I'll cover for you as long as I can. Your father would want you to fight, so fight." He walked away before she could respond. Katie stood holding the earpiece, her vision blurred with tears she had not cried in years. Around her, the convoy prepared to roll. She slipped the earpiece into her pocket and returned to her truck. But she did not get in. Instead, she waited, watched. And when the convoy began to move, when attention shifted and eyes looked forward, Katie slipped away. She moved between buildings, staying low and fast, until she reached the armory. The door was unlocked. Her gear was exactly where she had left it. M48-6 rifle, rangefinder, ghillie suit, 100 rounds of match-grade ammunition, her father's dog tag on a chain around her neck. She loaded everything into a pack and slipped out the back. The base was emptying as the convoy departed, Marines waving and shouting farewells. Katie moved in the opposite direction, toward the perimeter fence, toward the wild country beyond. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She thought of her father kneeling in Fallujah dirt. She thought of Coleman's promise finally kept. She thought of 480 Marines driving toward a valley that smelled like death. And she thought of the North Ridge, waiting in the dawn light, the place her father had marked as holy ground for snipers. Katie crossed the fence line and began to run. The desert opened before her, vast and silent and unforgiving. 7 kilometers, 2 hours. She had trained for worse. She checked her watch and set her pace. Behind her, Camp Pendleton faded into the morning haze. Ahead, the border mountains rose like broken teeth against the sky. She whispered into the wind, a prayer or a promise or both. "I'm coming, Dad. I'm finally flying." The rifle was heavy on her back. The sun was hot on her face. The ground was rough beneath her boots. But Katie Hayes ran on, following the path her father had walked 2 decades before, chasing the ghost of a man who had died protecting others, racing toward a battle she was forbidden to join. And somewhere in the wide blue sky, she felt him watching, felt his hand on her shoulder one last time, felt his voice in the wind. "Steady now, Katie girl. Breathe slow. Let the shot surprise you." She ran faster. The mountains grew closer. The radio earpiece in her pocket crackled with static, the emergency channel waiting, silent but alive. Behind her, the convoy rolled south toward Arizona and destiny. Before her, the North Ridge waited, patient as stone, guarding its secrets and its dead. Katie Hayes ran toward the sound of gunfire that had not yet begun, toward the screams that would soon fill the air, toward the choice that would define her, not as Robert Hayes' daughter, not as the metal baby, or the logistics sergeant, or the girl they would not let fight, but as a warrior, as a Marine, as a sniper who understood what her father had known all along. That true honor was not given, it was not inherited. It was earned in the moment when the world asked you to stand and you did not run. When the rulebook said to wait and you chose to act. When safety meant death for others and you picked up your rifle and said no. The sun climbed higher. Katie's breathing found its rhythm. The pack settled on her shoulders. Her legs burned but did not falter. She had been running toward this moment her entire life, through grief and doubt and the weight of a name too heavy for one person to carry. Now the weight felt right, felt earned, felt like wings. She thought of her father's last words, the ones Coleman had finally delivered. "Stronger than you know, don't let anyone stop you from flying." Katie Hayes flew. The desert blurred past, the mountains beckoned, and on the North Ridge, in a position marked by a dead man's careful hand, a place of honor waited for a daughter who had spent 15 years learning to be worthy of it. The convoy would reach the valley in 4 hours. The assault would begin at dawn tomorrow. Intel said the enemy was weak. Intel was wrong. Katie knew it in her bones the way her father had known storms. She could not stop the disaster, but she could be there when it came. She could stand on the high ground with her rifle and her training and her father's ghost. She could do her job, the real one, not the one they had assigned her out of fear or politics or misguided protection, but the one she had been born to do, the one her father had died teaching her. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Katie ran on into the burning day, and the desert swallowed her whole, and the war that would make her a legend began its slow, inevitable approach, like thunder rolling across distant hills. The climb devoured time and strength in equal measure. Katie's lungs burned with each breath, the thin desert air offering no mercy to those foolish enough to challenge gravity at this altitude. 7 kilometers sounded manageable on paper, the kind of distance Marines covered every morning before breakfast. But paper did not account for the 40 pounds of gear strapped to her back, or the slope that seemed to steepen with every step, or the sun that hammered down like divine punishment for the sin of disobedience. She had been running for 90 minutes when the terrain shifted from sand to rock. Her boots found purchase on stone that had been baking since before humans learned to make war. The rifle case dug into her shoulders, sweat soaked through her uniform, evaporating almost instantly in the dry heat, leaving salt crystals that burned her eyes. Katie did not slow, could not slow. 480 Marines were driving toward a trap, and she was the only person in the world who understood just how perfectly that trap had been designed. Because Marcus Wade knew how Marines thought, had been one, had trained them, had turned that knowledge into something dark and profitable when the Corps had cast him out for crimes Katie could only guess at. Her father's journal entry haunted her. Some men need war too much. Wade was one of those men. And now he had built himself a private war in the borderlands, funded by cartel money, staffed by mercenaries who cared nothing for flags or nations, only for the paycheck that came from killing Americans. Katie checked her GPS watch. 4.8 kilometers covered, 2.2 to go. She was making better time than expected, the adrenaline and fear working together to push her past normal human limits. Behind her, the convoy would be passing through the last checkpoint, Marines joking and checking weapons, officers reviewing the assault plan one final time. Ahead, the North Ridge waited like a promise her father had made 23 years ago and was only now being kept. The radio in her pocket crackled. Coleman's voice came through, distant and wrapped in static. "Ghost 7, this is Sierra 1, do you copy?" Katie pulled the earpiece out and fitted it into her ear. She keyed the mic once. Single click for acknowledgement. Speaking would waste breath she needed for climbing. "Where are you, Hayes?" Katie glanced at her GPS. 5 clicks out. 90 minutes to position. A long pause, then Coleman's voice again. Quieter now, almost tender. "Your old man would be proud. Stay safe out there." Katie keyed the mic twice. 2 clicks for understood. She wanted to say more, wanted to thank him for finally keeping the promise he had made to her father. But words felt inadequate, and breath felt precious. The connection went silent. Katie tucked the earpiece back in and kept moving. The landscape changed as she climbed higher. Scrub brush gave way to bare rock. Lizards skittered away from her boots, ancient survivors who knew when to flee and when to freeze. Katie envied them their simplicity. Survival for them meant finding shade and catching insects. Survival for her meant reaching a ridge she had never seen in person, setting up in a position mapped by a dead man's hand, and becoming good enough with a rifle to save hundreds of lives while staying alive herself. No pressure, she thought, and almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. She crested a rise and saw the compound for the first time. It sat in the valley below like a wound in the earth, all concrete and razor wire, and the particular ugliness that came from buildings designed only to cage and control. From this distance, it looked small, almost manageable. Katie knew better. She pulled out her rangefinder and began taking measurements. Main compound to her current position, 1,800 meters. Too far for effective shooting. She needed to get closer. The north ridge her father had marked would put her at 1,200 meters, right at the edge of what the M40A6 could do reliably in skilled hands. Katie's hands were skilled. She had made shots at 1,500 meters on the range. But range targets did not shoot back, did not move, did not have friends with automatic weapons and a burning desire to kill American snipers. She glassed the compound through the rangefinder, looking for patterns, counting guards, mapping the defensive positions. What she saw made her stomach clench. This was not a cartel stronghold. This was a military installation run by people who understood fields of fire and interlocking defenses and all the other technical details that separated amateurs from professionals. Guard towers at each corner, positioned to provide overlapping coverage of the approaches. Machine gun nests dug into the walls, their barrels angled to create kill zones at the natural choke points. Mortar pits visible behind the main building, the weapons covered but ready. And on the walls, men who moved with the discipline of soldiers, not the chaos of criminals. Wade had built himself a fortress, and in 6 hours, 480 Marines were going to assault it, thinking they outnumbered and outgunned the defenders. Katie did the math in her head. If each of those guard positions held even 3 fighters, and the buildings held reserve forces, and the defensive positions were properly supported, the Marines would be walking into a meat grinder. 47 would die in the first 10 minutes, maybe more, unless someone broke the geometry, unless someone on the high ground started eliminating the key positions before the assault began, unless Katie Hayes became the monkey wrench in Wade's perfect machine. She tucked the rangefinder away and kept climbing. The North Ridge was close now, less than a kilometer. Katie could see the rock formation her father had marked on his maps. 3 large boulders clustered together with gaps between them, perfect for a rifle barrel. Natural cover, natural concealment. The kind of position snipers dreamed about and rarely found. Her legs screamed for rest. Her shoulders ached from the pack. Her mouth was dry as sand despite the water she had been sipping every 15 minutes like her training had taught her. Katie ignored all of it. Pain was temporary. Death was permanent. And somewhere in that compound below, 120 American hostages waited in darkness, hoping for rescue, praying that someone would come. Katie would come, but she would come as death's messenger, not its victim. She reached the base of the North Ridge and stopped for the first time since leaving Camp Pendleton. 90 seconds to catch her breath, 90 seconds to drink deeply from her canteen, 90 seconds to feel the weight of what she was about to do settle onto shoulders that seemed too small to carry it. Then she started the final climb. This was not running anymore. This was technical mountaineering, using hands as much as feet, finding holds in rock face and pulling herself upward with muscles that burned and trembled but refused to quit. The rifle case caught on outcroppings. The pack shifted and tried to pull her backward. Katie climbed anyway because quitting meant 480 Marines would die and she would live with that knowledge forever. She would rather die on this ridge than live with that. The final 10 meters were nearly vertical. Katie wedged her boot into a crack, gripped a jutting stone, and hauled herself up and over the edge. She collapsed onto flat ground, gasping, every muscle screaming. For 30 seconds, she just lay there, lungs heaving, vision swimming. Then training took over. She rolled onto her stomach, low crawled to the boulders and began setting up her hide. The ghillie suit came out first, burlap and netting that would break up her outline and make her part of the landscape. Katie pulled it on over her uniform, adjusting the camouflage to match the surrounding rock and scrub. Next came the rifle, assembled with practice speed, scope mounted and zeroed according to her notes from the last range session. She set up the bipod, rested the rifle between the boulders, and looked through the scope. The compound jumped into sharp focus. Katie's breath caught. From here, she could see everything. Every guard, every weapon position, every weak point in Wade's perfect fortress. And there, walking from the main building to inspect the perimeter, a man with gray hair and the bearing of command. Katie zoomed in on his face and felt recognition slam into her chest like a physical blow. Marcus Wade. 20 years older than the last time she had seen him, 20 years harder, but unmistakably the man who had brought her a stuffed horse on her 10th birthday and told her stories about her father's exploits and training. The man her father had worried about in journal entries written in the quiet hours between operations. The man who had chosen money and violence over honor and duty. Variables lined up in her head. Calculations she had done 1,000 times on the range. She could take the shot right now, could drop Wade where he stood and tear the head off this particular snake. But that would give away her position, would bring every fighter in that compound looking for her, would burn her only chance to do what actually mattered, which was not killing Wade but saving Marines. Personal revenge could wait. Duty came first. Katie lifted her finger from the trigger and began cataloging targets. She opened her notebook and started drawing, mapping every position, every weapon, every guard. She noted their patrol patterns, their shift changes, the gaps in their coverage. She looked for the linchpin targets, the positions that, if eliminated, would create holes the Marines could exploit. The machine gun nest on the east wall covered the main approach. Take that out and the Marines could push through. The mortar pit behind the main building could rain death on advancing forces. Silence that and the assault would have a chance. The guard towers provided observation and fields of fire. Eliminate the observers and Wade would be fighting blind. Katie made her list. Target priority 1 through 10. The kills that mattered most. The geometry that needed breaking. She checked her ammunition. 100 rounds. Should be enough. Would have to be enough. The sun tracked across the sky. Katie lay motionless in her hide, watching, waiting, learning. Below her, the compound shifted into evening routine. Guards changed, lights came on, and in the fading light, Katie saw movement she had not expected. The hostages, being marched from the main building to what looked like an old storage facility. 120 people, moving in a ragged line, hands bound, heads down. Katie counted children, counted women, counted old men who looked like they could barely walk. Among them, an elderly man with military bearing, despite the restraints, helping a young woman who seemed ready to collapse. Katie's scope lingered on him, something about the way he moved, the way he held himself. She had seen that posture before in her father's old photographs. The bearing of a Marine who had been broken by war, but never quite defeated. Could it be? Could James Cooper, the man her father had saved in Fallujah, be among the hostages? Use them as human shields if the assault used them as human shields, if the assault went bad. Wade was not stupid. He knew the Marines would hesitate to fire into buildings holding civilians, would use that hesitation to maximum advantage. Katie adjusted her plan. Some shots would have to wait until the hostages were clear. Other shots could be taken immediately. The mortar crews were far enough from civilian areas. Same with the guard towers. But the machine gun nests on the south wall would have to wait, too close to where the hostages were being held. Complexity upon complexity. Katie had thought this would be about shooting, was learning it was about choices, about weighing lives against lives, about becoming someone who decided who lived and who died based on calculations of tactical necessity rather than simple morality. Her father had done this, had made these choices, had lived with them afterward. Katie was beginning to understand why he had come home from war changed, why he had spent so many evenings staring at Montana mountains as if trying to see something beyond the horizon. He had been carrying the weight of every choice, every kill, every person he could not save. Now Katie was picking up that same weight. She wondered if she was strong enough. Suppose she would find out. The radio crackled. Coleman again. Ghost 7, convoy is 1 hour from staging area. Assault scheduled for 0600 tomorrow. Acknowledge. Katie keyed the mic once. Tomorrow morning, 12 hours to wait. 12 hours to watch and plan and prepare. 12 hours to think about what she was going to do and whether it would be enough. Coleman's voice softened. Be smart out there, Katie. Your dad never took stupid chances. Don't you start. Katie keyed the mic twice, then added a third click. Her own code. I love you too. Coleman would understand. And on the north wall, invisible too. And on the north wall, invisible to everyone except Katie, a fighting position was being constructed that made her blood run cold. Counter sniper hide. Professional grade. Whoever was building it knew exactly what they were doing. They were preparing for the possibility that the Marines would have sniper support, which meant they were preparing for her, or someone like her. Wade had thought of everything. Katie marked the position in her notebook. Target priority 3. Take out the enemy sniper before he could zero in on her location. The hunter becoming the hunted, becoming the hunter again. The oldest game in warfare. She scanned the rest of the high ground and found 2 more potential sniper positions, both oriented to cover the north ridge where she now lay. Wade had not just prepared for assault. He had prepared for overwatch, had closed every angle, covered every approach. This was not arrogance. This was professional military planning executed by someone who had spent decades learning how to kill. Katie recalculated her odds. 3 enemy snipers, unknown capability, unknown weapons, all positioned to hunt her the moment she revealed herself. She would get maybe 3 shots before they triangulated her position. 3 kills before she had to move or die. 3 shots to change the battle, to save the battalion, to honor her father's legacy and Coleman's promise and all the things she had spent 15 years preparing for without knowing it. 3 shots. Katie had better make them count. Night fell completely. Stars wheeled overhead, the same stars her father had used to navigate during land navigation training, the same stars that had watched him die in Fallujah, the same stars that now watched his daughter prepare to do what he had taught her. Katie did not sleep, did not dare. She watched the compound, memorized every detail, and waited for dawn. At 0300, movement below. The Marines had arrived at the staging area 5 kilometers out. Katie could not see them, but she could hear them on the radio, voices crisp and professional as they prepared for assault. Coleman was with them, coordinating, making sure everyone was in position. Stone was there too, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who believed his plan was perfect. Katie wanted to warn them, wanted to scream into the radio that they were walking into a slaughter. But Stone would not listen, would order her to return to base, would court-martial Coleman for giving her the radio. So Katie stayed silent and watched the compound prepare for the battle that would determine whether she was a hero or a criminal, whether her disobedience would be vindicated or condemned. At 0500, the sky began to lighten. Dawn came to the desert in shades of gray, softening the harsh lines of day and night, turning the world uncertain and dreamlike. Katie checked her rifle one final time, chambered around, adjusted her scope for the morning light, controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, became the machine her father had taught her to be. The Marines would attack at 0600. Katie had 1 hour to do as much damage as possible before they moved into the kill zone. 1 hour to break Wade's perfect fortress. 1 hour to prove that one Marine with a rifle and a steady hand could change the mathematics of war. She acquired her first target, the guard tower on the northeast corner. Range 1,210 meters. Wind 6 miles per hour from the west. Temperature 68 degrees and climbing. The guard in the tower was backlit by the rising sun, his silhouette perfect against the lightning sky. Katie exhaled. The reticle settled. Her finger took up slack on the trigger. Everything her father had taught her, every hour on the range, every night studying ballistics, every moment of preparation came down to this. One squeeze, one bullet, one chance to start the cascade that would save lives or cost them. She thought about her father's last words. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. She thought about Coleman's promise finally kept. She thought about 480 Marines driving toward death and 120 hostages praying for rescue. She thought about being Katherine Hayes instead of Robert Hayes' daughter, about earning wings instead of inheriting them, about choosing to fly when the world said to stay grounded. Katie squeezed the trigger. The rifle spoke. The suppressor muffled the report to a whisper that died in the desert wind. 1,200 meters away, the guard in the tower collapsed. 1. Katie cycled the bolt, smooth and automatic, years of training making the motion effortless. The brass ejected, glinting in the early light before falling into the collection bag she had set up to avoid leaving evidence. She chambered another round and acquired target 2 before the first body had finished falling. Guard tower, southwest corner, another silhouette against the dawn. Katie adjusted for the slight difference in range, 1,190 meters, wind unchanged. The guard was looking toward his fallen comrade, confusion visible even at this distance. He would never understand what had killed him. Squeeze! The rifle whispered. The guard dropped. 2. Katie shifted aim before her brass hit the bag. The machine gun nest on the east wall, the one covering the main approach. 2 men visible, one feeding ammunition, one behind the gun. Katie chose the gunner first, more important tactically, harder to replace under fire. Range, 1,240 meters. She held one click high for the extra distance. The gunner's head filled her scope, unaware, probably thinking about breakfast or home or anything except the fact that his life was being measured in seconds. Squeeze! His head snapped back. The loader looked up, shocked, beginning to understand that death was visiting them from somewhere impossible. Katie gave him 3 seconds to process it. Then she sent him after his friend. 3, 4. The brass clinked into the bag like coins into a collection plate. Offerings to the god of war. Katie swept her scope across the compound and saw the first stirrings of alarm. Guards running, officers shouting, the smooth machine of Wade's fortress beginning to realize something was wrong. But they did not know where the shots were coming from. The suppressor in the distance made her effectively invisible. They were looking at the wrong ridges, scanning the wrong angles, wasting precious seconds while Katie continued her work. Mortar pit, 3 men visible, scrambling to man their weapon. The team leader was pointing, trying to direct fire toward where he thought the threat was. Katie settled her crosshairs on his chest center mass and ended his speculation permanently. 5. The other 2 mortar crew dove for cover. Smart. But Katie had already shifted to her next priority target. Guard tower, northwest corner. The observer there was on a radio, probably reporting to Wade, probably saying they were under sniper fire but could not locate the shooter. Katie located him just fine. 1,205 meters. Wind had picked up slightly, now 7 miles per hour. She compensated and fired. 6. The observer dropped his radio. It bounced once on the tower platform and then fell to the ground far below. No one would be calling Wade for a while. Katie's hands moved in the mechanical rhythm her father had drilled into her. Aim, breathe, squeeze, cycle. Aim, each repetition perfect. Each shot a prayer. Each kill a choice she would carry forever, but would make again because the alternative was watching Marines die in a trap she could have prevented. The counter-sniper hide she had marked earlier showed movement. Katie's stomach tightened. Here it came. The response she had known was inevitable. An enemy sniper emerging, setting up his own rifle, beginning his own calculations about where she might be hiding. Katie marked him, studied him, learned his pattern. He was good, she could tell by the way he moved, economical and professional. But he made one mistake. He assumed she would be on the obvious ridge to the north, the one that textbooks would recommend for Overwatch. Katie was 40 meters south of the obvious position. Her father had taught her that. Use the position the enemy expects as bait. Be somewhere else. The enemy sniper settled in, began scanning. His scope swept past Katie's hide 3 times without pausing. Good camouflage. Good fieldcraft. She could kill him now, but that would give away her position to the other enemy snipers she knew were out there. Instead, she shifted targets, returned to the immediate threat. More guards were pouring out of the buildings, taking up positions, preparing for assault. Katie began picking them off, choosing the ones who looked like leaders, the ones shouting orders, the ones coordinating defensive fire. 7, 8, 9, 10. Her brass bag was filling. Her shoulder was starting to ache from the rifle's kick. Her eyes burned from staring through the scope, but Katie did not slow, could not slow. The Marines would attack in 20 minutes, and she needed to create as much chaos as possible before then. A radio transmission broke through her focus. Coleman's voice, tight with shock. Command, we have eyes on the compound. Multiple hostiles down. Unknown snipers engaging targets. Confirm we have friendly overwatch? Stone's voice came back, confused and angry. Negative. All designated snipers are accounted for. Who the hell is shooting? Katie smiled grimly and kept firing. They would figure it out eventually. Hopefully not until after she had won them the battle. Guard tower, southeast corner. The only tower still manned. The guard there had finally figured out the approximate direction of fire and was trying to get a bead on her with his rifle. Brave but futile, his AK-47 had an effective range of maybe 400 meters. Katie was 3 times that distance and invisible behind her ghillie suit and boulder cover. She put him down with a shot that would have made her father proud. Moving target, 1,200 meters, wind gusting. The guard spun and fell. 11. The compound was in chaos now. Orders being shouted, men running. Defensive positions being abandoned and reoccupied as confusion spread. Wade's perfect fortress was coming apart at the seams, not from massed assault, but from precise surgical strikes that no one could defend against because no one could see the surgeon. Katie checked her watch. 15 minutes until assault. She had eliminated 11 key positions and created gaps in the defensive line that did not exist 10 minutes ago. But she had also revealed that someone was out here, somewhere, and the remaining enemy snipers would be hunting. As if summoned by her thought, Katie's boulder exploded in a shower of rock fragments. Someone had fired at her position. Close, within 5 meters. Katie ducked instinctively, feeling stone shards cut her cheek. The second enemy sniper had found her. Katie scrambled backward, keeping low, moving to a new position 20 meters south. No time to set up the perfect shot. This was survival now. She peeked around a different boulder and scanned for the source of fire. There, muzzle flash from a ridge 800 meters to her east. The sniper was repositioning, trying to get a better angle on where she had been. Good discipline. But he had given away his location with that first shot. Katie settled the rifle, found him in her scope. He was moving, making himself a harder target. Smart, but not smart enough. Katie let him, predicted his path, and squeezed. 12. The enemy sniper's rifle clattered against rock as he fell. One threat down, at least one more still out there somewhere. Katie kept moving, kept scanning, kept looking for the kill shot that would end her before she could save anyone. The radio crackled. Martinez's voice, urgent, all units, advance to assault positions. Time on target in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Katie had 10 minutes to cause as much damage as possible before friendly forces entered the kill zone. She acquired new targets, chose quickly, fired accurately. 13. Machine gunner on the north wall. 14. Officer coordinating defense from the main building entrance. 15. Another mortar crew member, braver or stupider than his dead friends, trying to get the weapon operational. 16. Guard with an RPG lining up a shot toward where the Marines would soon appear. Each shot perfect. Each kill necessary. Each empty brass casing. Another piece of her soul she would never get back, but would gladly trade for the lives of the Marines she was protecting. And then Katie saw him, walking from the main building with the confidence of a man who had never lost a battle. Marcus Wade, gray-haired and hard-eyed and unbothered by the carnage around him. He was shouting orders, rallying his troops, trying to turn chaos back into order. Katie's crosshairs settled on his chest. 1,200 meters exactly. Wind steady, temperature climbing, every variable perfect. One squeeze and she could kill the man who had betrayed everything her father believed in. One bullet and this battle would be over. Her finger touched the trigger, applied pressure, began the sequence that would end a life. And stopped, because Wade was not alone. He was standing next to a building where the hostages were being held. And behind him, visible through a window, was a small child, maybe 8 years old, dark hair, terrified eyes, looking out at a world that had become a war zone. If Katie missed by even 6 inches, if the wind shifted at the wrong moment, if any of 1,000 variables went wrong, she would kill that child, would become the thing she was fighting against, would prove every dismissive comment right. Metal baby makes rookie mistake, gets civilian killed. Katie lifted her finger from the trigger, moved the rifle, found a different target. Wade would have to wait. The child would not die because of her impatience. She acquired target 17, 18, 19. Each shot moving the Marines closer to survival. Each kill another gap in the perfect fortress. The radio exploded with noise. Marines making contact. The assault beginning. And Katie realized with cold certainty that she was out of time. The battle was no longer hers to fight alone. Now it belonged to 480 Marines who would live or die based on whether she had done enough. She prayed to her father's ghost that she had. Then she settled in for the longest fight of her life. The first explosion tore through the morning air like the scream of a dying god. Katie watched through her scope as the lead Marine Humvee erupted in flame and shrapnel, the blast lifting the vehicle 3 feet off the ground before slamming it back down in a twisted wreck. Men poured from the hatches, some on fire, some missing limbs, all learning in the span of a heartbeat that the intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. This was not a lightly defended cartel compound. This was a fortress manned by professionals who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Machine guns opened up from positions Katie had not seen, had not mapped, had not eliminated. Heavy caliber rounds chewed into the advancing Marines, dropping men like wheat before a thresher. RPGs streaked from the walls, slamming into vehicles and defensive positions with precision that spoke of professional training and perfect preparation. And from the compound's interior, mortar rounds began falling with the kind of accuracy that required forward observers who knew exactly what they were doing. Katie watched 47 Marines die in the first 90 seconds. Watched them fall and burn and bleed while she had done nothing to stop it because she had been too focused on the positions she could see to look for the ones hidden in plain sight. The weight of those deaths settled onto her shoulders like a physical thing, crushing and permanent and deserved. Then training took over, and Katie began firing. Target 20, machine gunner who had just cut down 6 Marines. The suppressed rifle whispered and he fell silent. Target 21, RPG team reloading for another shot. 2 men this time. Katie put both down before they could aim. Target 22, forward observer on the roof calling mortar strikes. He died mid-transmission. Each kill bought seconds, bought space, bought a chance for the Marines below to recover from the shock and start fighting back. Katie worked the bolt like a metronome, each motion perfect, each shot calculated to cause maximum tactical disruption. She was not trying to kill everyone. She was trying to break the patterns, create confusion, give her brothers a chance to be Marines instead of victims. The radio in her ear was chaos, voices overlapping, men screaming for medics, officers trying to restore order. And underneath it all, the steady calm of Coleman coordinating the response despite the hell erupting around him. All units fall back to Rally Point Delta, wounded to the rear, suppressing fire on the east wall. We need that machine gun silenced. Katie found the machine gun, put 3 rounds into it. The gun went silent. The Marines advanced 10 meters. Martinez's voice cut through. Command, we are pinned. Estimate 200 plus hostiles, heavy weapons, organized defense, request immediate air support. Stone's reply was clipped and furious. Negative on air, too close to civilian structures. Pull back and regroup. Katie's stomach dropped. Pull back meant leaving the hostages, meant abandoning the mission, meant 47 Marines had died for nothing and 120 civilians would stay captive or worse. She keyed her radio. Sierra 1, this is Ghost 7. I can create a corridor. Give me 5 minutes. Coleman's voice came back, stunned. Hayes, that's you out there? Katie did not answer, did not have time. She was already acquiring targets, already planning the sequence that would open a path through Wade's perfect kill zone. Machine gun here. Mortar there. Sniper position on that roof. RPG team behind that wall. Each one a thread in the web that was catching and killing Marines. Each one a target she could eliminate if she was good enough and fast enough and lucky enough. She started with the third enemy sniper, the one she knew was out there somewhere hunting her. Katie had been scanning for him since the battle started, looking for the telltale glint of scope glass or the shift of camouflage that would betray his position. She found him on a ridge to her southeast, 850 meters out, settling in behind his rifle. Katie aimed 2 feet left of where his head was now, predicting where it would be when her bullet arrived. Squeezed. The enemy sniper jerked and went still. 23. Now she was alone on the high ground. Every enemy sniper eliminated, every eye that might have seen her removed from the equation. Katie used that advantage ruthlessly. She began working through her target list with mechanical precision, each shot shifting the tactical situation by tiny but crucial degrees. 24. Mortar crew member adjusting fire. 25. Squad leader coordinating defense from the east wall. 26. Machine gunner who had just acquired a firing position on a group of pinned Marines. 27. RPG gunner lining up on a Humvee full of wounded. The brass clinked into her collection bag. Her shoulder was numb from the constant recoil. Her eyes burned from the scope's eyepiece. But Katie did not stop. Could not stop. Men were dying down there, and every second she delayed was another chance for the bullet or explosion that would end a life that did not need to end. Coleman's voice cut through again. All units, advance on Hayes' corridor. Suppressing fire and move. We're getting our people out. The Marines surged forward, using the gaps Katie had created, pushing through defensive positions that 60 seconds ago would have slaughtered them. They moved with the discipline of professionals who understood they had been given a gift and intended to use it. Katie continued firing, staying ahead of their advance, clearing threats before the Marines encountered them. And then everything changed. A new voice came over the radio, older, colder, a voice Katie recognized from childhood visits and birthday parties in the time before everything fell apart. Katie Hayes. Marcus Wade's voice was conversational, almost friendly, as if they were chatting over coffee instead of trying to kill each other. I have to say, I'm impressed. Robert's daughter, all grown up and shooting like he taught you. He'd be proud, right before he'd be disappointed that you're interfering with my operation. Katie did not respond, kept firing, kept clearing threats. Wade continued, unconcerned by her silence. You know he trained me too, right here in this compound, taught me everything about long-range shooting. Funny that you're using his own lessons against a fortress he helped design. There's poetry in that. Katie's jaw clenched. Target 28, a fighter emerging from cover. She dropped him and moved on. Wade's voice hardened. You've killed 28 of my men. Each one represents a significant investment. I'm going to have to recoup that cost. And I think I know how. The transmission cut off. Katie felt ice spread through her veins. Wade had something planned, something that would hurt worse than bullets. She found out what 30 seconds later. The door to the building holding the hostages opened. Armed men emerged, dragging civilians with them, using them as human shields. Children in front, women, elderly men who could barely walk. And there in the center of the group, the old man Katie had noticed earlier. Even at this distance, even through her scope, she could see the bearing that marked him as someone who had served, who had fought, who understood exactly what was happening. Sergeant Major James Cooper, her father's friend, the man Robert Hayes had saved in Fallujah 15 years ago. Now standing in the middle of a kill zone, hands bound, surrounded by armed fighters who knew exactly how valuable he was as a shield. Wade's voice returned. Recognize him, Katie. Your father pulled him out of a burning Humvee while insurgents tried very hard to prevent it. Robert took 2 bullets saving Cooper's life. Now you get to choose whether Cooper's life ends today. Because I'm going to have my men execute 1 hostage every 5 minutes until you stop shooting. Katie's hands tightened on the rifle. Her heart hammered. Every instinct screamed at her to put a bullet through Wade's skull, but he was standing behind a child, behind Cooper, behind human shields that made the shot impossible. Wade knew it. His voice carried amusement. Clock starts now, 5 minutes. Then the first one dies. Your call, Katie girl. The transmission ended. Katie's mind raced. 5 minutes, 300 seconds. She could kill Wade in that time if she had a clean shot, could eliminate enough threats to make rescue possible, could do 1,000 things except the one thing that mattered, which was saving the hostages without getting them killed. Unless Katie's eyes swept the compound, analyzing, calculating, seeing not just what was, but what could be. The hostages were clustered near the east wall. The Marines were advancing from the west. If she could create enough chaos on the south side, draw defenders away from the hostages, the Marines might have a window to breach and extract. It would mean giving up her hidden position, would mean revealing herself to every fighter in that compound, would mean becoming a target for hundreds of guns instead of an invisible threat. It would also mean she could save the hostages and the Marines both, if she was good enough, if she was fast enough, if she was willing to trade her life for theirs. Katie thought about her father jumping on a grenade to save 3 Marines he had never met. Thought about Coleman carrying the guilt of that death for 15 years. Thought about what it meant to protect those who could not protect themselves. She made her choice. Katie keyed the radio. All units. In 60 seconds, I'm going loud on the south wall. When you see muzzle flashes, breach east and extract hostages. You'll have maybe 2 minutes before they reposition. Coleman's voice was sharp. Hayes, that's suicide. They'll zero you in seconds. I know. Katie's voice was calm. Tell my father I did my job. She did not wait for a response. She shifted position, moving to a more exposed boulder that gave her a better angle on the south defensive positions, set up the rifle, loaded a fresh magazine. Then she did something no sniper ever wanted to do. She removed the suppressor. The next shot would announce her position like a thunderclap, would draw every gun in the compound, would give her maybe 30 seconds before the return fire made her position untenable. Katie planned to make those 30 seconds count. She looked through the scope, found her targets, machine gun nest south wall, mortar crew behind it, guard tower providing overwatch, RPG team in the courtyard, all clustered together, all about to have a very bad day. Katie took a breath, let it out halfway, settled into the perfect stillness her father had taught her, and pulled the trigger. The unsuppressed M40A6 roared like the voice of God. The report echoed off the mountains, announcing to everyone within 5 miles that a sniper had just fired and giving them the exact direction to look. Katie did not care. She was already cycling the bolt, already acquiring target 2. The machine gunner's head snapped back. Katie shifted. The mortar crew member dropped. Shift. The guard in the tower fell. Shift. The RPG gunner collapsed. 4 kills in 8 seconds. Katie kept firing. The south wall erupted in chaos, fighters scrambling, trying to find cover, trying to locate the threat. Some of them started firing back, their rounds hammering the rocks around Katie's position, sending up sprays of stone chips that cut her face and hands. Katie ignored the blood, ignored the near misses, kept shooting. 29, 30, 31. Each kill another second of chaos, each second another meter the Marines could advance. Through her scope, she saw the Marines breach the east wall, saw them pour into the compound, saw Coleman leading them despite his age, despite the regulations that said master sergeants should command from the rear. He was up front, rifle in hand, charging toward where the hostages were being held. And Katie saw Wade watching it happen, his face twisted in rage, realizing too late that he had been outplayed by a sergeant he had dismissed as irrelevant. Wade pointed directly at Katie's position, shouted orders. A dozen fighters turned their weapons toward the north ridge and opened fire. Heavy caliber rounds tore into the boulders around Katie. Rock exploded. Shrapnel flew. Something hit Katie's shoulder and spun her half around. She got back on the rifle, kept shooting. 32, 33. The numbers became meaningless. There was only the target and the trigger and the need to buy 1 more second for the Marines below. A mortar round landed 10 meters from her position. The blast wave lifted Katie and slammed her into rock. Her rifle clattered away. Her ears rang. Blood poured from a dozen small wounds. She crawled toward the rifle, fingers scrabbling against stone, desperate to get back in the fight. Another explosion, closer. Katie felt her left leg go numb. Looked down and saw shrapnel embedded in her thigh. Not arterial. She would live. For now, if she could get back to shooting before they bracketed her position and ended this. Her fingers closed around the rifle. She dragged it back, checked the scope, cracked but functional. The rifle itself seemed intact. Katie pulled herself into firing position, her wounded legs screaming, her shoulder bleeding, her ears still ringing from the blast. Through the scope, she saw the Marines had reached the hostages, saw them cutting bindings, organizing extraction, creating a protective cordon, saw Cooper standing tall despite his age, helping to shepherd children towards safety, and saw Wade abandoning his fortress, running toward a vehicle, trying to escape while his mercenaries died buying him time. Katie settled the crosshairs on his back. 1,200 meters, wind gusting, blood in her eyes, wounds screaming, every variable wrong. But she had made harder shots on better days, and this was not a day for missing. She exhaled. The world narrowed. There was only the target and the bullet and the space between them. Katie's finger touched the trigger. A voice crackled in her ear. Coleman, Hayes, abort the shot. We have the hostages. We have everyone. You did it. Now get out of there before they kill you. Katie heard him, understood, knew he was right, but her finger did not leave the trigger, because Wade was still running, still escaping, still able to build another fortress, recruit another army, trap another battalion of Marines in another perfect kill zone. Some men needed to die so others could live. Wade was one of them. Katie's training took over. She calculated the shot with mechanical precision. Wade was running, but his pattern was predictable. 3 strides between cover points, moving left to right, range increasing as he fled. She had maybe 2 seconds before he reached the vehicle that would carry him to safety. She led the target, adjusted for movement, for distance, for wind, for every variable that separated hope from certainty. Her wounded shoulder screamed. Blood obscured her vision, but her hands were steady, had always been steady. That was the gift her father had given her. Steadiness when everything else shook. Katie squeezed. The rifle roared. Marcus Wade stumbled mid-stride. His hand reached for something that was not there. His legs folded. He went down hard and did not move again. 34. Katie dropped the rifle and rolled away from the boulder as return fire saturated her position. She low-crawled backward, using the terrain, moving toward dead ground where the compound's guns could not reach. Her leg was not working right, left a trail of blood on rock. But she moved anyway because stopping meant dying, and she had promises to keep. The firing intensified. Someone had called in her exact position. Mortars started walking toward her, each explosion closer than the last. Katie could hear the incoming rounds, could feel the concussion waves, could taste the cordite and dust in her own fear. She had been afraid before, but not like this. Not with death coming in increments, closing the distance with mathematical precision. She crawled faster. 20 meters. 30. Her arms were giving out. Her leg was useless. Blood loss was making her lightheaded. But she kept moving because her father had not raised a quitter, and Coleman had not kept his promise just to watch her die on a ridge in Arizona. 50 meters. The dead ground was close, just beyond that next boulder. Katie could make it if she could just move a little faster, if her arms would just hold out a little longer. A mortar round landed 5 meters behind her. The blast picked Katie up and threw her forward like a rag doll. She hit the ground hard, the air driven from her lungs, her vision whiting out from pain and impact. For a moment, she could not move, could not breathe, could only lie there and wait for the next round that would finish what the first had started. It did not come. She was in the dead ground. The angle was wrong for the mortars. She had made it. Katie tried to stand, failed, tried to crawl, managed maybe 2 meters before her arms gave out completely. She lay there in the dust, bleeding and broken, listening to the battle continue without her, listening to her Marines fighting and dying and fighting some more. She had done everything she could, had killed 34 enemy fighters, had broken Wade's perfect defense, had given the Marines and the hostages a chance. Whether that was enough remained to be seen. But it was everything she had. Katie closed her eyes, prepared to die, made peace with it. Then hands grabbed her. Strong hands, familiar voices. I got you, Sarge. Garcia's voice shaking with fear or adrenaline or both. I got you. You're gonna be okay. Katie wanted to thank him, wanted to say something meaningful. But the pain and blood loss were catching up, turning her vision gray, making speech difficult. She managed 2 words. The hostages? All safe. Garcia was dragging her now, pulling her toward where Marines had established a defensive position. Every Marine who saw what you did is safe because of you. You saved us, Sarge. You saved all of us. That was enough. Katie let her eyes close. Let the gray turn to black. Let consciousness slip away, knowing that the choice had been made, the duty fulfilled, the price paid. Whether it was enough remained to be seen, but it was everything she had to give. She felt herself being lifted, felt the rough hands of Marines who were being gentle despite the urgency, felt Garcia's hand gripping hers like an anchor, heard voices calling for medevac, for morphine, for someone to please God, hurry because she was bleeding out. Katie wanted to tell them she was fine, that she had survived worse in training, that a little blood and shrapnel would not stop a Hayes, but consciousness was slipping like sand through fingers. The voices grew distant. The pain receded into something far away and unimportant. Katie fell into darkness knowing that she had done her father's work in her own way, had protected those who could not protect themselves, had earned the right to be called Marine. The battle raged on without her. She woke to rotor wash in the peculiar vibration of helicopter flight. Consciousness came in pieces, like a puzzle being assembled by uncertain hands. Sound first. The thrum of blades, Coleman's voice giving coordinates, Garcia talking nonstop about something Katie could not quite focus on. Pain followed, sharp and insistent, her shoulder and leg competing to see which could hurt worse. Then vision, blurred at first. The interior of a medevac bird swimming into focus, medics working on her with practiced efficiency. IV bags hanging, blood pressure cuffs squeezing. The organized chaos of military medicine dealing with trauma that would kill a civilian, but which they fought every day to save. Coleman's face appeared above her, streaked with dust and blood and tears he was not bothering to hide. His hand found hers and gripped it like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. "You're alive," his voice broke on the words. "You crazy, brave, stupid kid. You're alive." Katie tried to speak. Her throat was raw. Everything hurt. But she managed a whisper. "Everyone?" Coleman nodded. 433 Marines extracted, 120 hostages recovered. Wade dead. The compound neutralized. He leaned closer. "Your father would be so damn proud." Katie felt tears sliding down her face, mixing with the blood and dust. She had not cried since her mother died, had not let herself. But now the tears came and she could not stop them. Relief, grief, exhaustion, pain, all of it flowing out in the salt water that streaked her dirty face. Coleman did not tell her to stop, just held her hand and let her cry. Let her be human after hours of being a machine. Let her break a little because she had earned that right too. The helicopter banked. Katie felt the shift, looked through the open door and saw the compound receding. Smoke still rising, fires still burning. The valley that had almost become a graveyard for an entire battalion, now just another battlefield in a war that never seemed to end. But moving away from that battlefield in organized columns, 433 Marines walked. Alive. Going home. Because one sergeant had said no to orders and yes to duty, and had paid for that choice in blood and pain, and the kind of courage that came from knowing the cost and doing it anyway. Katie closed her eyes. The tears stopped. The pain settled into something manageable. And for the first time since she had left Camp Pendleton yesterday morning, she let herself rest. The helicopter flew on. The Marines below grew smaller. The battle faded into memory. And Katherine Hayes, no longer just Robert Hayes' daughter, drifted into dreams of Montana and her father and a future she had earned with 34 kills and 433 saves and a choice to fly when the world said to stay grounded. Katie managed to focus on his face, saw Coleman crying openly, saw 15 years of guilt and grief finally releasing. She squeezed his hand back, one pressure, meaning understood. The helicopter banked, the world tilted. Katie's vision grayed again, but she fought to stay conscious, fought to understand what had happened, what she had done, what it had cost. The numbers filtered through. 47 dead in the initial ambush, 34 enemy killed by her rifle, 120 hostages saved, 433 Marines extracted. The math did not balance, would never balance. War did not do mathematics. It did subtraction, masquerading as addition, taking lives and calling it victory when fewer died than could have. Katie closed her eyes and let the gray take her again. This time when she fell into unconsciousness, she fell knowing that her father would understand the choice she had made, would forgive the disobedience, would recognize in her actions the same calculus he had made when he jumped on a grenade and saved 3 Marines at the cost of his own life. Not all debts could be paid, but some could be honored. Katie had honored her father the only way that mattered. By flying when they told her to stay grounded, by fighting when they ordered her to wait, by protecting those who could not protect themselves, even when it meant breaking every rule and risking everything. The helicopter carried her towards safety in the future and whatever consequences waited. Behind her, the compound burned. Wade's fortress reduced to smoke and rubble, his perfect trap sprung by the one person he had dismissed as irrelevant. And on the North Ridge, abandoned in the chaos of extraction, Katie's rifle lay among the boulders where her father had marked the perfect sniper position 23 years before. The weapon that had killed 34 men and saved hundreds. The instrument of her disobedience and redemption. Someone would recover it later, clean it, return it to her, but it would never be quite the same. None of them would. The battle had changed everything, had taken 47 lives and saved hundreds more, and turned a sergeant dismissed as a metal baby into something else entirely. Into a warrior, into a legend, into Katherine Hayes instead of Robert Hayes' daughter, into someone who had earned the right to fly. The helicopter flew on through smoke and cordite and the burning afternoon sun. Inside, medics worked on Katie with practiced efficiency, starting IVs, bandaging wounds, stabilizing her for the flight to the trauma center. She drifted in and out, catching fragments. Garcia was there, his arm freshly bandaged, refusing to leave her side. He kept talking, filling the silence with words that might have been for her or might have been for himself. "I'm sorry, Sarge, for everything, for all the names, for treating you like you didn't belong. You saved my life 3 times today. Once with that first RPG team, once with the machine gun that had us pinned, and once just by showing us what a real Marine looks like." Katie tried to respond, could not. Her throat was too dry, her strength too depleted. But she heard him, understood, forgave him without words because words seemed inadequate for what they had all been through. Martinez appeared, his face streaked with powder burns. He leaned close so Katie could hear him over the rotor noise. "Stone is recommending you for the Medal of Honor." Coleman backed him up. "Every Marine who saw what you did backed him up." He paused. "You disobeyed direct orders and saved a battalion. I don't know whether to court-martial you or salute you." Katie managed a whisper. "Both." Martinez laughed, the sound breaking into something that might have been "Yeah, probably both." The helicopter banked again, and Katie saw through the open door the compound receding into the distance. Smoke rose in black columns. Fire still burned, and scattered across the valley floor were the remains of the battle. Destroyed vehicles, abandoned positions, the detritus of war. But also moving in organized columns away from the compound, 433 Marines walking, alive, going home to families and futures and all the things that would have ended if Katie had followed orders and stayed behind. She watched them until the helicopter turned and they disappeared from view. Then she let her eyes close and focused on breathing, on staying conscious, on riding out the pain that was threatening to pull her back into darkness. Coleman was talking to the pilots, coordinating their approach to Camp Pendleton's medical facilities. Katie heard him give her name, her rank, her injuries. Heard him add words that seemed to carry weight. Medal of Honor candidate, save the battalion, handle with care. The world below scrolled past, desert giving way to inhabited land, mountains to cities, the border to California. They were leaving the battlefield behind, returning to the world where wars were discussed instead of fought, where the cost was measured in budget reports instead of body bags. Katie wondered if she would fit in that world anymore. If anyone who had seen what she had seen, done what she had done, could go back to the simple certainties of peacetime. Her father had struggled with it, had spent his last years before deploying again, trying to reconcile the man who jumped on grenades with the man who coached Little League and fixed fence posts. Now Katie understood. There was no reconciling. There was only choosing which man to be on which day and hoping you chose right more often than you chose wrong. The helicopter began its descent. Katie felt the change in pressure, the shift in altitude. They were close now, minutes from medical care, from surgery, from the long road of recovery that would determine whether her wounds healed clean or left her with scars that went deeper than skin. She thought about the rifle she had left behind, wondered if it would be recovered or if it would sit on that ridge forever, a monument to the day one Marine chose disobedience over duty and saved hundreds because of it. Thought about Wade dead in the dust, about the 33 other men she had killed, about the 47 Marines who died before she could save them, About Cooper pulled from the wreckage 15 years after her father had pulled him from different wreckage. Full circle. Debts paid forward. Lives saved and lost and saved again in the endless arithmetic of war. The helicopter touched down. Medics swarmed. Katie was lifted onto a gurney, rushed through doors into fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells in the controlled chaos of an emergency room preparing for trauma. Doctors shouted orders. Nurses moved with purpose. Somewhere someone was calling for blood, for instruments, for all the tools needed to repair bodies broken by war. Katie lay still and let them work. Let herself be poked and prodded and prepped for surgery. Let go of the control she had maintained for so many hours and trusted that these people knew their jobs as well as she knew hers. Coleman appeared beside the gurney, gripping her hand. The doctors were trying to push him out, but he refused to move. "I made your father a promise." Coleman's voice was steady now, the tears gone, replaced by the iron certainty of a man who had finally kept the word he had given 15 years too late. "I promise to tell you that you're stronger than you know. I promise not to let anyone stop you from flying." Katie looked up at him, this man who had carried her father's last words like a stone in his chest, who had broken that promise every day until today, who had finally given her the tools to do what needed doing. She whispered through cracked lips, "You kept it." Coleman's face crumpled. "Yeah, finally." The doctors pushed him back, began wheeling Katie toward the operating room. Coleman followed as far as they would let him, then stopped at the doors, standing at attention, saluting the gurney as it disappeared into surgery. The last thing Katie saw before the anesthesia took her was Coleman's salute. The last thing she heard was his voice. "Semper Fi, Katie, Semper Fi." Then darkness took her, and she fell into dreams of Montana snow and her father's hands teaching her to shoot in a future that was no longer forbidden, but earned. The helicopter blades beat the air into submission, drowning out everything except the thunder in Katie Hayes' chest. She sat in the open door, legs dangling over nothing, watching the desert scroll beneath her like a film reel of her father's last moments. Smoke still rose from the valley where 433 Marines had almost died, where 47 had not been so lucky, where she had pulled a trigger and changed everything. Moment when Colonel Stone had looked at her with eyes that finally saw. But now, flying toward Camp Pendleton and whatever came next, Katie felt the tremor starting deep in her bones. Not fear, not regret, just the weight of what she had become in a single morning. Master Sergeant Jake Coleman sat across from her, his face gray beneath the dust and blood. His left leg was splinted and wrapped, shrapnel wounds seeping through the bandages. He had taken the hit covering Katie's position when Wade's mercenaries had tried to storm the North Ridge, had stood between her and 3 men with automatic weapons and held the line long enough for Captain Martinez and his squad to arrive. Now he watched her with the kind of expression fathers wore when they realized their daughters had grown up when they weren't looking. The medic had tried to sedate him. Coleman had refused, said he needed to stay awake, needed to see Katie make it home, needed to finally keep the promise he had made 15 years ago to a dying man in a Fallujah street. Katie met his eyes. The noise of the rotors made speech impossible, but some conversations happened in silence. Coleman nodded once, slow and deliberate. She nodded back. Between them passed an understanding that needed no words. He had given her permission to fly. She had flown. And together they had saved every Marine who could still be saved. The helicopter banked, and Camp Pendleton came into view, sprawling and solid and permanent in a way the desert valley could never be. Katie watched it grow larger and felt something loosen in her chest. Home, for whatever that meant now. For however long they let her stay before the court-martial hearings began. Because she had disobeyed direct orders, had abandoned her post, had engaged the enemy without authorization. The fact that her actions had prevented a massacre would matter in the court of public opinion, maybe even in the court of military justice. But the rulebook was clear. She had broken it, and broken things had consequences. The helicopter touched down on the landing pad outside the base hospital. Medics swarmed before the wheels stopped spinning, pulling Coleman and the other wounded onto stretchers with practiced efficiency. Katie climbed out and stood in the rotor wash, rifle in hand, watching the organized chaos of men saving men. No one told her where to go. No one seemed to know what to do with her. She started walking, past the hospital, past the admin buildings, toward the armory where this had all begun, what felt like a lifetime ago. Her boots struck pavement in a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Left, right, left, right. The same cadence her father had taught her on morning runs through Montana snow. The same rhythm that had carried her up the North Ridge and through the longest 6 hours of her life. The armory was empty. Katie found her corner and set down the rifle. She began the ritual. Strip, inspect, clean. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought had fled. The barrel was fouled with carbon, the action gritty with dust. She cleaned it all away with the same care a priest might show a sacred text. This rifle had spoken for her when words would have failed, had killed 37 men and saved 433. It deserved to be honored. The door opened. Katie did not look up. She heard bootsteps, measured and heavy, smelled cigar smoke and old coffee. Colonel Stone's voice filled the space like distant thunder. Sergeant Hayes. Katie set down her cleaning rod and stood at attention. Sir. Stone walked closer. He was still in combat utilities, mud-caked and torn. A field dressing wrapped his left forearm where an RPG fragment had caught him. His face was harder than the desert rock, carved by too many years of command and too few moments of doubt. But his eyes were different now. Older, sadder, wiser. At ease, Stone gestured to the bench. Sit. Katie sat. Stone remained standing, looking down at the disassembled rifle like it held answers to questions he had not known to ask. I've been a Marine for 32 years. Stone's voice was quiet, almost conversational. Seen combat in 3 wars, lost men in all of them, but I've never seen anything like what you did today. Katie said nothing. There was nothing to say. The facts spoke louder than any defense she could mount. Stone continued, 47 Marines died before you took your first shot. Intelligence failed us. I failed them. He paused, jaw working. But 433 lived because you refused to follow orders, because you trusted your instinct over my command, because you were willing to risk everything to do what was right instead of what was authorized. Sir, Stone raised a hand. I'm not finished. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and set it on the bench between them. That's my letter of resignation, effective immediately. I'm recommending Captain Martinez for battalion command, and I'm recommending you for the Medal of Honor. Katie stared at the paper like it might catch fire. Sir, you don't need to resign. Yes, I do. Stone's voice cracked, just slightly, just enough to show the human beneath the rank. I made a promise to your father's friend that I would keep you safe. After Sergeant Coleman came to me 15 years ago, showed me Robert Hayes' last letter, begged me to watch over you. So I did. I watched over you by keeping you caged, by telling myself that protection and prevention were the same thing. He sat down heavily on the bench, suddenly looking every one of his 58 years. Your father saved 40 men in Fallujah by charging into fire. You saved 433 by doing the same. The difference is, I tried to stop you, tried to honor his memory by denying you the chance to build your own. He looked at Katie, really looked at her, and his eyes were wet. I was wrong, and those 47 men paid for my mistake with their lives. Katie felt her own eyes burning. Sir, you couldn't have known the intel was compromised. But you did. Stone's voice was flat. You warned me. I dismissed you, called you inexperienced, called you my responsibility to protect. When the truth is, you were the most experienced person in that briefing room. You'd studied that terrain, understood the danger. And I ignored you because I was too busy keeping a promise to a dead man to listen to the living Marine in front of me. Silence settled between them. Outside, the base continued its rhythms, vehicles passing, voices calling, the machinery of military life grinding on regardless of individual grief or revelation. Katie spoke carefully. Master Sergeant Coleman told me what my father said about letting me fly. Stone nodded. Robert Hayes was the bravest man I never met. Coleman's told me the stories, told me how your father died with a smile because he knew his men would live, how he made Coleman promise to tell you that you were stronger than you knew. He wiped his eyes roughly, and Coleman kept that promise today. Gave you the tools to fly. All I did was clip your wings for 15 years. You were trying to honor my father. Katie's voice was steady. That's not something to apologize for. Stone looked at her. Your father would be proud of who you've become. Not because of me, in spite of me. He stood and extended his hand. I won't be at your Medal of Honor ceremony. I don't deserve to be. But I want you to know that when I think about what it means to be a Marine, I won't think about the men I've commanded or the battles I've won. I'll think about a sergeant who disobeyed orders because obeying them would have meant watching her brothers die. Katie stood and took his hand. The grip was firm, final. Stone held it for a moment longer than protocol required, then released and walked to the door. He paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About your father, about the years I stole from you, about everything. Then he was gone. Katie sat back down and stared at the letter on the bench. A career ended. A promise kept too late. A man learning at 58 what her father had known at 30. That honor wasn't about following orders. It was about making the hard choice when the easy one would cost lives. She picked up the cleaning rod and returned to her rifle. The work steadied her, gave her hands something to do while her mind processed what had just happened. Stone was resigning. She was being recommended for the Medal of Honor. And somewhere in the hospital, Coleman was probably telling the doctors to go to hell because he needed to stay awake just a little longer. The door opened again. Katie didn't look up. Figured it was Martinez or one of the other officers coming to debrief her. But the footsteps were wrong. Too hesitant. Too young. She glanced up. Corporal Luis Garcia stood in the doorway, his arm in a sling, his face pale beneath the tan. The swagger was gone. The mean grin. The certainty that had made him cruel. Now he just looked like what he was. A 23-year-old kid who had seen too much death and was trying to figure out how to live with it. Sergeant Hayes, his voice cracked. Can I talk to you? Katie set down the rifle. Garcia. He walked closer, each step seeming to cost him. He stopped a respectful distance away and stood at attention, even with his wounded arm. I came to apologize for everything I said, everything I did, all the times I called you metal baby or said you didn't belong or you don't need to. Katie's voice was quiet. We're good, Corporal. Number Garcia shook his head. We're not. Not until you let me say this. He took a breath. You saved my life today. Saved all our lives. I was pinned under that Humvee with 6 guys and we were all about to die. Then this RPG gunner just dropped. No sound, no warning, just dropped. And I looked up and saw you on that ridge. His voice broke. He didn't try to hide it. You were so far away you looked like a ghost. And I thought, that's Hayes. That's the girl I've been tormenting for 6 months because I was too stupid and angry to see what everyone else missed. My father died in Iraq and I blamed you for having a Medal of Honor dad when mine just got a flag. Blamed you for being alive when he was dead. And today you saved me anyway. Tears ran down his face. He didn't wipe them away. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Don't deserve to wear the same uniform as you. But I'm asking anyway because I need to be a better man than I've been. And that starts with admitting I was wrong about you. Wrong about everything. Katie stood, walked to Garcia, looked him in the eyes and saw the kid beneath the anger. The son who had lost a father, too young, and spent years trying to fill the hole with meanness because grief had nowhere else to go. She had been there, knew that particular species of pain. Your father was Sergeant First Class Miguel Garcia, killed in action Ramadi 2006. Katie said it like a statement, not a question. Garcia's eyes widened. I looked you up after the 3rd time you called me metal baby. Wanted to understand why you hated me so much. Garcia's face crumpled. He loved me. Died before I could tell him I loved him back. I was 8. Thought I had forever. Katie nodded. I was 14. Same story. Different war. We're more alike than you wanted to admit. Garcia wiped his eyes. I'm sorry for all of it. Katie extended her hand. You proved yourself today. Corporal, when Master Sergeant Coleman got hit, you were the one who dragged him to cover. Captain Martinez told me. Said you took fire doing it. Got your arm torn up, saving the man who was protecting me. Garcia looked at his sling. Seemed like the least I could do, after everything. They shook hands. Katie held his gaze. Your father would be proud, not because you apologized to me, because you became the kind of Marine who dragged a wounded NCO through enemy fire. That's the story that matters. Garcia nodded. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. How do you do it? Carry the weight of who your father was without it crushing you? Katie thought about that. Thought about 15 years of being Robert Hayes' daughter before she could be Katherine Hayes the Marine. Thought about the rifle in her hands and the men she had killed and the lives she had saved. Thought about her father bleeding in Fallujah dirt and her kneeling at his grave and the long road between those moments. You stopped carrying it, she said finally. You let it carry you. My father's not a weight. He's wings. And the only way to honor him is to fly. Garcia smiled, small and real. Thank you. He saluted, perfect despite the wounded arm. Then he turned and walked out, standing a little taller than when he had entered. Katie returned to her rifle. The barrel gleamed now, clean and ready. She began reassembling it with the same care she had used to take it apart. Each piece fit exactly where it belonged. Each component served its purpose. Together they made something greater than the sum of parts. Not unlike a battalion, not unlike a family. The door opened a third time. Katie looked up and her breath caught. Coleman stood in the doorway, leaning on crutches, his face pale but determined. A corpsman hovered behind him, clearly unhappy but unwilling to argue with a master sergeant who had decided to walk. Coleman waved off the corpsman. I'm fine. Go save someone who needs it. The corpsman retreated. Coleman hobbled inside and lowered himself onto the bench with a grunt of pain. Katie wanted to help but knew better. Coleman was the kind of man who needed to do things himself or not at all. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Coleman spoke, his voice rough with exhaustion and painkillers, an emotion too long suppressed. Your father died in my arms. Don't know if you knew that. Katie shook her head. Mom never told me the details. Coleman stared at the wall like he could see through it to Fallujah, to 2009, to the moment that had defined both their lives. We were clearing buildings. Robert was on point. Always on point because he said the most experienced Marine should take the most dangerous position. Insurgent jumped out with a grenade. Robert could have dove away, could have saved himself. His voice cracked. But there were 3 privates behind him. Kids barely older than Garcia is now. So Robert jumped on the grenade, absorbed the blast with his own body. Shrapnel tore him open, but the privates didn't get a scratch. Katie's vision blurred. She had heard the official story, knew her father had died saving his men, but hearing it from someone who was there, who had held him while he died, made it real in a way the medal citation never had. He was still conscious when I got to him. Coleman continued, still trying to give orders, telling me to get the men to cover, to call for medevac, to make sure the building was clear. I told him to shut up and save his strength. He laughed, actually laughed. Coleman wiped his eyes. Then he grabbed my hand, looked me right in the eye, said, Katie's stronger than she knows. Tell her that. Tell her not to let anyone stop her from flying. Tell her I'm proud of who she'll become. He coughed blood. Made me promise I'd watch over you. Made me promise I'd deliver the message. Katie could barely breathe. Did you? Coleman shook his head. I watched over you by keeping you grounded. Told Stone about your father's last words, and then spent 15 years making sure you never got the chance to prove them true. He met her eyes. I was scared. Scared of losing you like I lost him. Scared of failing him again. So I failed you instead. Failed you for 15 years until this morning when I finally gave you that radio and let you be who you were meant to be. You kept your promise. Katie's voice was thick. Today, when it mattered, you gave me permission to fly. Coleman smiled through tears, and you flew higher than either of us could have imagined. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. This is yours, been carrying it since Fallujah, waiting for the right moment. He unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a dog tag. Not Katie's father's spawn, the one she wore around her neck. A different one, Coleman's own. Your father gave me this the night before the patrol where he died. Said I'd been a good friend, good Marine, good man. Told me if anything happened to him, he wanted me to have something to remember him by. He pressed the tag into Katie's hand. I want you to have it. So you remember that your father chose his friends as carefully as he chose his battles, and he trusted me to do right by you. It took me 15 years, but I finally did. Katie closed her fingers around the tag. The metal was warm from Coleman's pocket, worn smooth by years of carrying. She looked at the man who had saved her father's last words for a decade and a half before finally delivering them at the moment when they mattered most. Thank you for keeping him alive in your memory, for telling me the truth, for today. Coleman nodded. He's proud of you. Wherever he is, know that. I know. They sat together in the quiet armory while outside the base prepared for nightfall. 2 people connected by a man who had died too young, finally understanding what he had wanted for both of them. Not protection, not safety, but the courage to do hard things when hard things were required. Coleman shifted on the bench. I'm retiring. Medical discharge. This leg's not healing right and I'm too old to start over. Katie felt a pang of loss. Where will you go? Montana, maybe. Coleman smiled. Your father always talked about Montana. Said it was the kind of place where a man could think, might buy some land, raise horses, teach kids how to shoot. Katie smiled back. My father's ranch is still in the family. My aunt runs it now. You'd be welcome there. Coleman's eyes softened. I'd like that. The door burst open. Captain Martinez stood in the doorway, breathing hard like he'd been running. His face was flushed with excitement and something else. Something that looked like relief. Hayes, Coleman, you need to come to the hospital. Now. Katie stood. What happened? Martinez grinned. One of the hostages, an old man, says he needs to talk to Katherine Hayes immediately. Says he knew her father. Katie and Coleman exchanged glances. They followed Martinez out into the evening, moving as fast as Coleman's crutches would allow. The hospital was organized chaos. Doctors and nurses moving between beds where wounded Marines and rescued hostages received care. Martinez led them to a private room at the end of the hall. Inside, an old man sat propped against pillows, eye lines running into both arms. He was maybe 70, weathered and lean, with the kind of scars that came from a lifetime of hard living. But his eyes were bright and sharp, and when he saw Katie, he smiled. You look just like him. The old man's voice was rough but warm. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw. Robert Hayes' daughter, all grown up. Katie approached the bed. Do I know you? The old man extended a shaking hand. Sergeant Major James Cooper, retired. Your father saved my life in Fallujah. 20 years ago, different deployment than the one where he died. I was pinned down, bleeding out, ready to die. Robert ran through fire to get me, dragged me 300 meters to safety, took 2 bullets doing it. Neither one stopped him. Katie took his hand gently. He never mentioned it. Cooper laughed, the sound turning into a cough. That was Robert. Never mentioned anything he did. Just did it and moved on. He squeezed her hand. The cartel grabbed me in Texas 6 months ago, held me and 119 others in that compound. We were waiting to die. Then this morning, the shooting started and we thought this was it. But you know what happened? Katie shook her head. Someone started killing the guards. One by one. Perfect shots from so far away we couldn't even see the shooter. The guards panicked, started running. And then the Marines came through the door. He looked at Katie with eyes full of tears. Martinez told me it was you on that ridge. Told me Robert Hayes' daughter was the one who saved us all. I was just doing my job, Katie said quietly. Cooper shook his head. You were doing your father's job, protecting people who can't protect themselves. He reached under his pillow and pulled out something wrapped in dirty cloth. I've been carrying this for 20 years. Figured if I ever got out of that hellhole, I'd give it back to the Hayes family where it belongs. He unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a dog tag. Robert Hayes' original tag, the one he had given to Cooper the night he saved his life. Katie's breath caught. Your father said I'd been through enough. Said I'd earned the right to carry a piece of someone who believed I was worth saving. Cooper pressed it into Katie's hand. Now I'm giving it to you. Because you earned the right to know that your father's legacy isn't just medals and ceremonies. It's people like me who got to grow old because he was willing to be young and brave. Katie looked at the tag through blurred vision. 3 tags now. Her father's, Coleman's, and Cooper's piece of her father. 3 men, 3 generations, 3 moments when someone chose to save a life instead of preserve their own. Thank you, she managed, for keeping his memory alive. Cooper smiled. You kept more than his memory alive today. You kept his spirit breathing. Keep flying, Katie Hayes. Your father's watching and he's proud. Martinez touched Katie's shoulder. There's more. All 120 hostages want to meet you. Want to shake your hand, thank you themselves. Katie looked at the faces around her, Coleman on crutches, Martinez with his quiet pride, Cooper with his tears and his stories and his gratitude. And somewhere beyond this room, 119 more people who had been given back their lives because she had refused to follow orders that would have killed them. She thought about her father kneeling in Fallujah, thought about the choice he had made to jump on a grenade when he could have jumped away, thought about 15 years of being told she was too precious to risk, too important to expose, too much her father's daughter to be allowed to be herself. And she thought about this morning, the ridge, the rifle, the moment when she had finally become who she was meant to be. Not despite her father's legacy, because of it. Let's go meet them, Katie said. They deserve to know who they're thanking. Another room, his arm still in a sling. Another room, his arm still in a sling, falling in step without being asked. Then more Marines, wounded but walking, battered but unbroken. A battalion learning to see clearly for the first time. The rec room had been converted into a gathering space. 119 hostages waited inside, some in wheelchairs, some bandaged, all alive. They ranged from children to elderly, from mothers to veterans, from every background and every state, united only by the fact that they had been taken and held and then freed by Marines who had almost died trying. When Katie walked in, they stood. Those who could, a standing ovation that started in silence and grew into applause that shook the walls. Katie stopped in the doorway, overwhelmed. This wasn't protocol, wasn't military. This was simply human. People thanking the person who had given them back their lives. An 8-year-old girl broke from the crowd and ran to Katie. She had dark hair and darker eyes and a bandage on her left arm. She stopped in front of Katie and looked up with a kind of expression that held no room for doubt or fear or hesitation. "You're the angel lady," the girl said. "My mama said an angel saved us. Are you an angel?" Katie knelt down to the girl's level. "What's your name?" "Emma." "Hi, Emma. I'm Katie, and I'm not an angel. I'm just a Marine." Emma cocked her head, considering. "My mama died. The bad men killed her." Katie's throat closed. "I'm sorry." Emma nodded seriously. "But you saved me, so now you're my angel. Can I hug you?" Katie opened her arms. Emma crashed into her, small and fierce and alive. They stayed like that while the room watched in silence. A child and a warrior holding on to each other in the wreckage of violence, in the miracle of survival. When Emma finally pulled back, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I drew this. For you." Katie unfolded it. A crayon drawing, a stick figure with a rifle standing on a hill, wings sprouting from the figure's back. Below it, in careful letters, "Angel Lady Katie." Katie's vision blurred completely. She pulled Emma close again and whispered, "Thank you. I'll keep this forever." The other hostages came forward then, one by one, shaking her hand, hugging her, thanking her, each one with a story. Each one alive because Katie had refused to let them die. She listened to every story, remembered every name, let them see that she was real, that she cared, that their lives had been worth the risk she had taken. Cooper rolled forward last, his nurse helping him stand. He looked at Katie and then at the room full of saved lives and then back at Katie. "Your father would be so damn proud." Katie looked around the room, at Emma clutching her drawing, at Cooper with his tears, at the 119 people who would go home to their families because she had pulled a trigger 37 times, at Coleman and Martinez and Garcia and all the others who had fought and bled and refused to give up. And she thought about her father, about the man who had jumped on a grenade to save 3 privates, about the legacy he had left not in medals or ceremonies, but in the lives he had chosen to value more than his own. "I hope so," Katie said quietly. "I really hope so." Night fell over Camp Pendleton. Katie stood outside the hospital, looking up at stars that turned overhead in their ancient patterns. Tomorrow would bring debriefings and investigations and all the machinery of military justice. Tomorrow would bring questions about disobeyed orders and unauthorized actions and whether the ends justified the means. But tonight, she had this: the quiet, the stars, the knowledge that 433 Marines had gone home alive, that 120 hostages would see their families again, that a little girl named Emma still believed in angels. Katie touched the 3 dog tags hanging around her neck. Her father's, Coleman's, Cooper's piece of her father. 3 generations of Marines, 3 moments of choice, 3 decisions to protect others even when it cost everything. She whispered into the night, "I did it, Dad. I finally flew." The stars answered with their ancient light. And somewhere in that vastness, Katie felt her father's hand on her shoulder one last time, felt his voice in the wind. "Well done, Katie girl. Well done." She stood there until the cold drove her inside, until duty called her back to the world of regulations and consequences, and the price of being right when orders said to be wrong. But she carried with her the warmth of Emma's hug and Cooper's gratitude and Coleman's promise finally kept. She carried with her the knowledge that she had earned her wings, not inherited them, not been given them, earned them through blood and discipline and the willingness to stand alone on a ridge and do what needed doing when no one else could. She carried with her the weight of 47 lives lost and 433 lives saved, and the impossible math of war that never quite balanced but always demanded payment. And she carried with her the certainty that when the moment came again, when the world asked her to choose between safety and sacrifice, she would make the same choice, would pick up her rifle and climb the ridge and do her father's work in her own way. Because that was what it meant to be a Hayes. Not to be perfect, not to be fearless, but to fly when others said to stay grounded, to fight when orders said to wait, to protect those who could not protect themselves, no matter the cost. Katie walked back to her barracks through the quiet base. Tomorrow would come with all its complications, but tonight she was simply a Marine who had done her duty, a daughter who had honored her father, a warrior who had finally learned to flank, and that was enough. 3 months passed like water through stone, slow and inexorable, wearing away everything except what mattered. Katie Hayes stood before the mirror in her dress blues, fingers working the buttons with the same precision she used to chamber rounds. The uniform was new, creased sharp as a blade, the fabric stiff against skin that had grown accustomed to desert dust and the weight of impossible choices. She looked at her reflection and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. Or maybe she had always been this person and was only now learning to recognize herself. The morning sun broke through the Virginia clouds, painting Arlington National Cemetery in shades of gold that seemed too beautiful for a place built on grief. Katie had arrived before dawn, driving the same rental car she had driven 3 months ago, when this had all been future tense and possibility. Now it was past and permanence, and the kind of weight that never lifted but learned to distribute itself across broader shoulders. She walked the familiar path to her father's grave, boots striking pavement in a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. The cemetery was still quiet, not yet invaded by tourists and school groups and the machinery of public remembrance. This hour belonged to the dead and those who loved them. Katie was grateful for the solitude. She knelt at the headstone. Gunnery Sergeant Robert Hayes, Medal of Honor, Fallujah, Iraq, 2009. The letters were unchanged, the stone was unchanged, but everything else had shifted in ways large and small, visible and hidden. Katie placed a single rifle cartridge at the base, the brass gleaming in the new light. Then she placed something else, a photograph. Her in dress blues, receiving the Medal of Honor from the President, flanked by Coleman on crutches and Martinez in his new oak leaves. Cooper stood behind them, tears streaming down his weathered face. And in the foreground, barely visible but unmistakably present, a small dark-haired girl clutching a crayon drawing of an angel. "I did it, Dad." Katie's voice was steady. "I flew, and I'm still flying." She stood and saluted, holding the position longer than a regulation required. Then she turned and walked back to the car. The ceremony would begin in 3 hours. She had promises to keep and miles to cover before then. The drive through Washington traffic was meditative. Katie let the chaos wash over her without sticking. Honking horns and aggressive lane changes, and the thousand small violences of people trying to get somewhere faster than physics allowed. She had learned patience on the North Ridge, lying in wait while the sun tracked across the sky and death waited for the right moment to arrive. Everything since then felt slow by comparison. She pulled into the parking lot of a veterans hospital in Silver Spring. The building was institutional gray, marked by the kind of architecture that valued function over beauty. Katie checked her uniform in the rearview mirror, adjusted her cover, and walked inside. The nurse at the desk recognized her immediately. "Sergeant Hayes, he's been asking about you all morning. Room 347. Katie took the elevator to the 3rd floor and walked the corridor with its smell of antiseptic and institutional food and the particular quiet of places where people went to heal or die. She knocked twice on the door of 347 and waited. "Come in." Master Sergeant Jake Coleman sat in a wheelchair by the window, looking out at a view of the parking lot and a strip of sky that promised nothing. His left leg ended at the knee now, the amputation clean and final. The infection had spread too deep, the shrapnel too embedded. The doctors had given him a choice between the leg and his life. Coleman had chosen life. Told Katie later that he had promises to keep and could keep them just fine with one leg and a stubborn disposition. He turned when Katie entered and smiled, the expression lighting his face in ways she had never seen before the battle. Pain did that sometimes. Stripped away everything false and left only what was true. Coleman's truth was that he had spent 15 years running from Robert Hayes' ghost and was finally ready to walk toward it, even on one leg. "You clean up nice." Coleman gestured to her uniform. "Ready for the big show?" Katie pulled a chair close and sat. "As ready as I'll ever be." They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, traffic moved. Birds landed on the window ledge and took flight again. The world continued its ancient patterns regardless of individual human drama. Coleman had been released from active duty 2 weeks ago with full honors and a medical retirement that would keep him comfortable, if not wealthy. He had already put a deposit on land in Montana, 20 acres adjacent to the Hayes family ranch. Said he wanted to raise horses and teach kids how to shoot and maybe figure out how to sleep through the night without seeing Fallujah in his dreams. "You nervous?" Coleman asked. "About the ceremony?" Katie shrugged. "I've been shot at. Speeches seem manageable by comparison." Coleman laughed. "Your father said the same thing before his medal ceremony. Told me he'd rather face another firefight than shake the president's hand. Still did it, though. Still stood up there and let them honor him, even though he thought the real heroes were the 3 kids he saved." Katie looked at her hands. 47 Marines died before I fired a shot. Hard to feel like a hero when you couldn't save them all." Coleman leaned forward. "You know what your father told me the night before he died?" Katie shook her head. "He said the hardest part of being a Marine wasn't the fighting, it was living with the ones you couldn't save while honoring the ones you could. He said every man he lost ate at him, but every man he saved made it worthwhile." Coleman's voice roughened. "You saved 433, Katie, and 120 hostages. That's not nothing. That's everything. Doesn't bring back the 47. No, it doesn't. But it means their families still have fathers and sons and brothers. It means those 433 get to go home and have lives and maybe save someone else someday." He reached out and took her hand. "Your father would tell you to honor the dead by living well and fighting hard for those still breathing. So that's what you do." Katie squeezed his hand. "What about you? What are you going to do in Montana?" Coleman smiled. "I'm going to teach Emma how to ride horses." Katie's breath caught. "Emma? Cooper called me last week." Coleman's eyes were bright. The girl's got no family left. Mother dead. Father was never in the picture. She's been in foster care since we brought her back. Cooper's been trying to adopt her, but he's too old and too sick. Cancer, stage 4, has maybe 6 months. Many years I have left. Told them I had many years I have left. Told them I had land in Montana and family nearby. He looked at Katie. "Your aunt agreed to help, said the Hayes Ranch could use more life." "You're adopting her?" Katie felt tears building. "We're adopting her," Coleman corrected. "Your aunt, me, and anyone else who wants to be part of raising a kid who's seen too much darkness and deserves some light." He paused. "Emma asked if you'd visit, said her angel ladies should know where to find her." Katie wiped her eyes. "I'll visit, as often as they let me." They sat together until the nurses came to prepare Coleman for transport to the ceremony. He would be there in his wheelchair, wearing his dress blues with the new medals pinned to his chest. Would stand when they called Katie's name. Would salute when they placed the ribbon around her neck. Would keep the promise he had made 15 years ago in a Fallujah street to a dying man who had asked him to watch over a daughter he would never see grow up. Katie drove to the Pentagon, where the ceremony would take place in the Hall of Heroes, a room lined with the names of every Medal of Honor recipient since the Civil War. Her father's name was there, etched in bronze among thousands of others who had chosen duty over survival and paid the ultimate price. Soon hers would join it, the first woman Marine to receive the medal, the first daughter to follow her father into that particular company of the brave and the broken. Captain David Martinez met her in the parking lot. He wore his new oak leaves with the discomfort of a man still adjusting to increased responsibility. Colonel Stone's resignation had moved him up faster than he had wanted, but he wore the weight well. Better than Stone had, some said, because Martinez led by listening instead of demanding, because he remembered what it felt like to be dismissed and made sure no one under his command felt that way again. "Hayes," Martinez extended his hand. "You ready?" Katie took it. "Define ready." Martinez smiled. "Your father asked me the same question." Different ceremony, same answer. He walked beside her toward the building. "There's over 1,000 people in there. Press, politicians, generals, every Marine who survived that valley and wanted to say thank you." He glanced at her. "Plus one very determined 8-year-old who threatened to sneak in if we didn't give her a seat." "Emma's here?" Katie's heart jumped. "Front row." Martinez's smile widened. "Wearing a dress she picked out herself. Keeps asking when her angel lady is going to arrive." They entered through a side door, away from the press and the crowds. The building was cool and echoing, built to impress and intimidate in equal measure. Katie had been here once before for her father's posthumous ceremony when she was 14. She remembered very little except the weight of the flag they had handed her mother and the feeling that she was watching her own life from a great distance. Now she was in it, present, alive, about to receive the same honor her father had earned with his last breath while she had earned hers by refusing to let others repeat his sacrifice. A protocol officer appeared and began explaining the ceremony sequence: where to stand, when to salute, how to receive the medal from the president without fumbling the moment. Katie listened with half her attention while the rest of her mind wandered to the North Ridge and the 6 hours that had changed everything. She could still feel the rifles kick against her shoulder, still see the targets dropping, still hear the screams on the radio as men she had never met begged for help she was forbidden to give. Until she gave it anyway. Until she decided that honor meant disobeying orders when orders meant death. Until she became what her father had always known she could be if someone would just let her try. The doors to the Hall of Heroes opened. Sound rushed in, a wall of voices and movement and expectation. Katie took a breath and walked through. The room was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls, cameras pointed like weapons. And in the front row, wearing a blue dress with white flowers, Emma sat between Cooper and Coleman. The girl's eyes were huge and bright and locked on Katie with the kind of faith that children gave to the people who saved them. Katie smiled and Emma waved, small and certain and completely without fear. Katie took her position at the front of the room. Martinez stood to her left, Coleman and Cooper to her right. The rest of the survivors from the valley filled the first 10 rows. Marines and hostages mixed together in a way that spoke to shared trauma and shared survival. Garcia sat among them, his arm healed, his face showing the kind of peace that came from asking for forgiveness and receiving it. The president entered and everyone stood. Katie saluted. The ceremony began. The citation was read by a general whose voice carried the weight of every war America had ever fought. Staff Sergeant Katherine Hayes distinguished herself by conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty. The words washed over Katie like water. She heard them but did not absorb them. Her attention was on Emma, who sat perfectly still, watching everything with the intensity of someone trying to memorize a moment. The president approached. Katie had met him briefly before the ceremony, shaken his hand, endured the small talk that preceded great moments. Now he held the medal, the ribbon blue and studded with stars, the medallion heavy with history and expectation. He placed it around her neck and stepped back. Sergeant Hayes, the president's voice filled the room. Your father saved 40 men in Fallujah by choosing their lives over his own. You saved over 500 by choosing action over obedience. Both of you understood what it means to be a Marine, not to follow orders blindly, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves, whatever the cost. He saluted her. Katie returned it. The room erupted in applause that shook the walls and rattled the windows and seemed to go on forever. Emma jumped to her feet, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Cooper wiped his eyes. Coleman saluted from his wheelchair, holding the position until his arms shook. Katie stood at attention while the applause rolled over her like thunder. She thought about her father in this same room receiving this same honor, probably feeling this same mix of pride and unworthiness and the certainty that the real heroes were the ones who did not make it home. She thought about the North Ridge and the rifle and the moment when she had decided that some things were worth dying for, but more things were worth living for. The ceremony ended. The crowd began to disperse, but Emma did not move. She sat in her chair, clutching her drawing, waiting for permission to approach. Katie walked to her and knelt down. Hi, Emma. Hi, Angel Lady. Emma's voice was small but steady. You look pretty. So do you. Katie touched the medal around her neck. You want to see it? Emma nodded. Katie lifted the ribbon over her head and placed it around Emma's neck. The medal hung to the girl's waist, too large and too heavy, but Emma touched it like it was made of starlight. My mama would have liked this, Emma said. She always said angels were real. Your mama was right. Katie's throat tightened, and she would be so proud of you. Emma looked up. Can I hug you? Always. The girl launched herself forward, small arms wrapping around Katie's neck, holding on like she was afraid to let go. Katie held her back, feeling the fragile weight of a life saved, a future preserved, a chance given to someone who had lost everything except the will to keep breathing. Cooper approached, leaning on a cane, his face gray with pain and determination. He had refused to miss this ceremony even though the cancer was eating him from the inside, had told the doctors he would die after he saw Katie receive her medal, not before. Now he stood before her, swaying slightly, smiling through the agony. Your father would be so proud. Cooper's voice was barely audible. I wish he could see this. Katie stood, Emma still attached to her side. He can, I know he can. Cooper nodded. I'll tell him myself soon enough. He reached out and squeezed her shoulder. Thank you for giving me the chance to see this, for letting me go home to my family, for being exactly who your father raised you to be. Thank you for keeping his memory alive, Katie said, for carrying his tag all these years. Cooper smiled. Now you carry it, and someday someone else will carry yours. That's how we live forever, through the people we save and the stories they tell. He walked away slowly, each step a battle against the pain. Emma watched him go, then looked up at Katie. Is he going to die? Katie considered lying, decided against it. Yes, soon. Emma nodded seriously. Like my mama, like your mama. But you saved me. Emma's voice was certain. So I won't die for a long time. That's right, Katie managed. You're going to live a long, long time. And I'm going to Montana with Mr. Coleman. Emma bounced slightly. He said there's horses and mountains, and I can learn to shoot like you. Katie smiled. He's a good man. He'll take care of you. Will you visit? Emma's eyes were huge. Will you come see me? As often as I can, I promise. Emma threw her arms around Katie again. Good, because angels should visit. The reception after the ceremony was held in a nearby room, tables laden with food that no one really ate because they were too busy talking and remembering and processing what they had survived. Katie moved through the crowd like a ghost, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, listening to stories of what people had been doing in the 3 months since the valley. Garcia approached with a young woman at his side. Sergeant Hayes, this is Maria, my girlfriend. He paused. I told her everything, about what I said to you, what I did. She wanted to meet the person who forgave me when I didn't deserve it. Maria extended her hand. Luis is a different man now. Better, because of you. Katie took her hand. He's better because he chose to be. I just gave him the chance. Garcia's eyes were wet. I'm going to Scout Sniper School. Got accepted last week. Martinez wrote my recommendation. Katie felt pride bloom in her chest. You'll do great. And when you graduate, you'll understand what it means to carry a rifle for people who can't carry it themselves. I already understand, Garcia said quietly. You taught me that. They talked for a few more minutes, then Garcia and Maria moved on. Katie found herself standing alone by a window, looking out at the Washington traffic and the people rushing to appointments and meetings and lives that had nothing to do with war or sacrifice or the cost of doing what was right when the world said to wait. Martinez appeared at her elbow. You okay? Katie nodded, just thinking. About what comes next? Katie turned to face him. The medal doesn't change anything. I'm still a sergeant. Still have to report for duty Monday morning. Still have to figure out how to be a Marine when everyone sees me as something else. Martinez smiled. You know what Colonel Stone told me before he left? What? He said the best thing he ever did was resign, because it meant you could finally be yourself instead of who he thought you needed to be. He paused. You're going to officer candidate school. Orders came through this morning. After that, you're coming back as a lieutenant to head the new Scout Sniper Integration Program. Katie's breath caught. I didn't apply for OCS. Martinez shrugged. Turns out when you save over 500 lives, people stop asking permission to reward you. The commandant himself signed off on it. You report to Quantico in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Katie felt the future opening before her, full of possibility and challenge, and the chance to make sure no one else got sidelined the way she had been. What about you? Martinez looked out the window. I'm staying with the battalion, for now, until someone decides I've learned enough to move up again. He met her eyes. But wherever I go, I'll remember what you taught me, that the best leaders trust their people to be warriors, not children. They stood together in silence while the reception continued around them. Eventually, Cooper approached, Emma holding his hand. The old man was barely standing, held upright by will alone. Katie, I need to ask you something. Cooper's voice was fading. Will you speak at my funeral when the time comes? Katie felt her chest constrict. Of course. It would be an honor. Tell them about your father. Tell them how he saved me. Tell them how you saved Emma. Cooper smiled. Tell them the Hayes family knows something about protecting people. I will. Katie promised. I'll tell them everything. Cooper nodded. Good, then I can rest. He looked down at Emma. You take care of this one. She's special. I know. Katie knelt and took Emma's other hand. We'll take care of each other. Emma looked between them, understanding more than a child should have to. Mr. Cooper's going to see my mama, isn't he? Yes, Katie said gently. And your mama will be so happy to see him. Will you tell her I miss her? Emma's voice broke. Cooper knelt with difficulty, bringing himself to Emma's level. I'll tell her you're brave and strong and you're going to have a wonderful life. I'll tell her not to worry because you've got angels watching over you. Emma threw her arms around him. They held each other while the room pretended not to watch, while hearts broke and mended and broke again at the sight of a dying man comforting a child who had already lost too much. When they finally separated, Cooper kissed Emma's forehead and stood. He nodded once to Katie, then turned and walked away. Slow, steady. A Marine to the end, heading toward his last deployment with the same courage he had shown in every battle. Katie watched him go and knew she would never see him alive again. The knowledge sat heavy but not unbearable. Some goodbyes could be survived, some losses could be honored, and some debts could never be repaid except by living well and fighting hard and making sure the sacrifice meant something. The reception wound down. People began to leave, filtering out into the Washington afternoon, returning to lives that would never quite be the same. Katie stood with Coleman and Emma, the three of them forming a small island in the emptying room. Ready to go home? Coleman asked Emma. Emma looked up at Katie. Is she coming? Not today, Katie said, but soon, I promise. Emma considered this, then nodded. Okay, but soon means soon, not grown up soon. Katie laughed. Deal. Real soon. Coleman wheeled toward the door, Emma walking beside him. They stopped at the threshold and Emma turned back. Thank you for being my angel. Thank you for reminding me why I fight, Katie said. Then they were gone. Katie stood alone in the Hall of Heroes, surrounded by the names of men and now women who had chosen duty over survival. She found her father's name on the wall and traced the letters with her fingertips. I kept flying, Dad, and I'm not stopping. She walked out into the afternoon sun. The city hummed with its usual chaos. Life continued. The world turned. And somewhere in Montana, a little girl would learn to ride horses and shoot straight and grow up knowing that angels were real because one had saved her life. 6 weeks later, Katie stood at Quantico wearing the single gold bar of a second lieutenant. Officer candidate school had tested her, but she had proven that Medal of Honor recipients earned their place through continued service. Her first assignment was to oversee the Scout Sniper Integration Program, ensuring qualified Marines received the opportunities she had fought for. But first, she had a promise to keep. The drive to Montana took 3 days. Katie arrived at the Hayes family ranch on a Thursday afternoon, mountains standing eternal against the sky. Coleman met her at the gate, standing on a prosthetic leg. Emma sat on a horse beside him, face lit with joy. Angel lady, Emma shouted, you came, I promised. Katie called back. Emma rode toward her, pulled the horse to a stop, and ran the last few feet into Katie's arms. Katie held her tight. Sounds like you're home. Emma pulled back. It is home, because you're here. They walked together to the ranch house, Coleman following at his own pace. The building was old but solid, built by Katie's great-grandfather and maintained by generations of Hayes family members who understood that some things were worth preserving. Her Aunt Sarah emerged from the kitchen, flour on her hands, smile on her face. Katie, Sarah pulled her into a hug. It's good to have you home. It's good to be home. Katie meant it. This place held her father's memory in every board and nail, held the lessons he had taught and the values he had lived. Coming here was not running from the past, it was embracing it. That evening, they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. Emma curled against Katie's side, half asleep. Coleman sat in a rocking chair, his prosthetic propped on the railing, peace on his face. Sarah brought out lemonade and cookies and stories about Katie's father as a boy, before the Marines, before the wars, when he was just Robert Hayes learning to shoot cans off fence posts. He would sit right where you're sitting, Sarah said, and he'd talk about flying, said when he looked at those mountains, he felt like he could do anything. Katie looked at the mountains and understood, felt her father's presence in the wind, in the stone, and the vast sky that went on forever. Felt his hand on her shoulder, felt his voice in her heart. Fly, Katie girl, just keep flying. Emma stirred. Tell me a story about the battle. Katie hesitated. Emma had heard versions already, sanitized for children, stripped of the blood and fear. But maybe she deserved more, deserved to know the truth of what had saved her. There were bad men, Katie began, And they had a lot of guns. Our Marines went to rescue you and the bad men tried to hurt them. So I climbed a mountain and I used my rifle to stop the bad men. One at a time, until the Marines could get to you. Did you get scared? Emma asked. Yes, every second. But being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means you keep going because people need you. Emma nodded seriously. Like my mama, she was scared, but she protected me until the end. Katie's throat tightened. Exactly like your mama. Being brave means being scared and doing it anyway. Are you still scared? Emma looked up with those huge dark eyes. Katie considered lying, decided Emma deserved the truth. Sometimes. When I think about all the people I couldn't save, when I remember the Marines who died before I could help them, but then I think about you and all the others who lived, and I know the scared was worth it. Emma hugged her tighter. I'm glad you were scared, because it means you're real. Angels aren't supposed to be scared, but you are. So you're better than an angel. You're a person who chose to help. Katie kissed the top of her head. You're pretty wise for 8 years old. I'm almost 9, Emma said. And Mr. Coleman says wisdom comes from seeing hard things and learning from them. I've seen hard things, so I'm wise. Coleman smiled from his chair. She's not wrong. They sat together until the stars came out, turning the sky into a map of infinity. Emma fell asleep against Katie's shoulder. Coleman told stories about Fallujah, the good parts, the times between firefights when Marines were just people trying to survive. Sarah listened and added her own memories of Robert, filling in gaps that time and distance had created. And Katie felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly. Peace was for people who had nothing left to fight for. But contentment maybe, the knowledge that she had kept her promises, had honored her father, had saved the people she could save and learned to live with the ones she could not. Cooper died 2 weeks later. Katie flew back for the funeral, wearing her dress blues, carrying the flag that draped his coffin. She spoke at the service, told the story of how Robert Hayes had saved Cooper in Fallujah, how Cooper had carried that debt for 20 years, how he had passed it forward by helping to save Emma. She talked about sacrifice and memory and the way good men lived forever through the lives they touched. Emma sat in the front row, dry-eyed and solemn, holding the dog tag Cooper had left her in his will. After the ceremony, she approached Katie and pressed something into her hand, a photograph. Cooper and Emma, taken a week before he died, both smiling at the camera with the kind of joy that comes from knowing time is short and choosing to fill it with love. He said to give this to you, Emma's voice was steady, said you'd know what to do with it. Katie looked at the photo, 2 generations separated by 60 years, connected by loss and resilience, and the people who had chosen to save them. She folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. I'll treasure it, Katie promised. Emma nodded. He said you would. He said you understood about keeping promises. Katie knelt to Emma's level. Do you understand that Mr. Cooper loved you? That your mama loved you? That everyone here loves you? Emma's composure finally cracked. Her face crumpled and tears came, hot and fast. Yes, but they all leave. Everyone leaves. Katie pulled her close. I'm not leaving. I'm right here, and I'll keep coming back as long as you need me. Promise? Promise. On my father's grave, on my medal, on everything I am. Emma cried against her shoulder until the tears ran dry. Then she pulled back, wiped her face, and managed a small smile. Okay, I believe you. They walked together to the graveside where Cooper was being laid to rest beside other veterans who had served and sacrificed and earned their place among heroes. Katie stood at attention while they folded the flag. Emma held Katie's hand, small fingers gripping tight, refusing to let go. The volleys fired, the bugler played taps. The flag was presented to Cooper's distant cousin, the only family he had left. And Katie thought about legacy and loss and the way good people left echoes that rang through generations. She returned to Quantico the next day and threw herself into work. The Scout Sniper Integration Program was taking shape, built on principles of merit and capability rather than politics and prejudice. Katie interviewed candidates, designed training protocols, fought with bureaucrats who thought women did not belong in combat specialties. She won more fights than she lost, using her mettle and her story and her unwillingness to back down as weapons against institutional resistance. Months became years. Emma grew strong and confident. Coleman's nightmares faded. Garcia graduated Scout Sniper School with honors. Martinez made colonel. Stone sent Katie a letter each anniversary, thanking her for teaching him that protection and permission were different things. 5 years after the battle, Katie returned to the North Ridge with survivors who wanted to remember. The compound was gone, bulldozed, and buried. Only the desert remained. Garcia stood beside her, now a sergeant, his daughter a toddler who pointed at birds. "Does it feel different?" Garcia asked. "Coming back?" Katie shook her head. "It feels the same, like holy ground. Because of what happened here, because of who I became here." Katie touched the dog tags. "I was my father's daughter when I climbed this ridge. I was myself when I climbed down." Garcia nodded. "Emma asked me to tell you something." Katie smiled. "How is she?" 14 now, smart as hell. Wants to join the Marines when she turns 18. Katie's chest tightened. "What does Coleman say?" "Says if that's what she wants, he'll support her. But he's hoping she'll at least consider college first." "And what did Emma want you to tell me?" Garcia smiled. "She said to tell her angel lady that she's learning to fly. Said you'd understand." Katie looked out over the valley where 433 Marines had almost died and lived instead, where 120 hostages had been given back their futures, where a girl named Emma had been saved by a woman who refused to follow orders when orders meant death. "I understand," Katie said. "Tell her to keep flying, and tell her I'm proud." They stood together until the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Then they walked down together, survivors of a battle that had changed them all, carrying stories that would outlive their bodies and become the legends that Marines told their children. Katie drove back to Quantico, back to the life she had built. She was a captain now, still fighting for standards and principles. At night, she would look at photographs on her wall. Her father, Coleman and Emma, the hostages, Garcia's family, Martinez. And in the center, her favorite, Emma at 14 on a horse, rifle across her lap, on the back, "To my angel lady, thank you for teaching me to fly." Katie would hold that photograph and feel her father's presence in the room, would hear his voice in the silence, would remember his last words delivered by Coleman after 15 years of waiting. "You're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone stop you from flying." She had flown, was still flying, would keep flying until the day came when she could no longer serve. And then she would pass the lessons forward, teach the next generation, make sure the legacy did not die with her. Because that was what it meant to be a Hayes. Not to be perfect, not to be fearless, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. To stand when others said to kneel. To fight when the rulebook said to wait. To fly when the world said to stay grounded. Katie set the photograph back on the shelf and prepared for the next day. There were battles to fight, people to protect, a legacy to honor not through words but through actions that echoed across generations. Outside, stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. The world turned, and somewhere in Montana, a girl who had lost everything and been given a second chance was learning to shoot, to ride, to live, carrying forward the example of a woman who had refused to let her die. The story was not over, would never be over as long as people remembered and learned and chose to be better than their circumstances demanded. As long as Marines like Katie Hayes stood on ridges and refused to follow orders that would cost lives. As long as girls like Emma grew up believing that angels were real because one had saved them. The legacy lived, the ghost rested, and the flight continued, generation after generation, each one lifting the next a little higher, teaching them that honor was not inherited but earned, that courage was not absence of fear but action despite it, that true warriors protected those who could not protect themselves. Always. Forever. Semper Fidelis. I spent weeks researching this story, and what strikes me most is this. Katie Hayes had every reason to follow orders and stay safe. Her father died serving. She'd earned her place through blood and sweat, only to be dismissed for 15 years. But when 480 Marines needed someone willing to risk everything, she didn't hesitate. What would you have done in her position? Followed orders or trusted your gut? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment, and if stories like this move you, hit subscribe. We honor these warriors every week.